Being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, no, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better.
Crop failures, famine, war, suffering on a scale completely unimaginable.
We are putting the cart before the horse. As Charles I said at the scaffold, he was the true defender of liberty.
Yeah, I've completely derailed the conversation.
Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m, and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's 9:30 a.m. Good morning. Welcome to the Point on GB News with Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner.
Taking on the judges, the government says it's going to take new powers. Effectively, European judges will be kept out of any deportation of illegal migrants. We'll believe it when we see it.
United in Manchester, fans of both the city's clubs laugh off claims that their team's badges are linked to slavery.
The march of wokery goes on. Does he go or doesn't he? Civil servants are apparently threatening to quit if Dominic Raab, the Deputy Prime Minister, isn't fired over bullying allegations. The report on this is expected in the next 24 hours.
And coronation snub. Why has the late Queen's lady-in-waiting not been invited to King Charles's big day? We talk to a royal confidant. Let us know your thoughts on all of our talking points today. Email us gbviews@gbnews.uk. But first of all, here is your morning's news with Rory Smith.
Thank you, Bev. The latest from the GB newsroom. Sir Jake Berry has branded Westminster's complaint system as outdated. The former Conservative chairman says it was wrong for the Deputy Prime Minister, Dominic Raab, to continue his job while under investigation for bullying allegations. Speaking to ITV, Sir Jake said the government needs to rethink how it deals with these sort of allegations, both against the ministers and members of Parliament. His comment comes amid reports that senior Ministry of Justice officials could quit if Dominic Raab is cleared of the allegations. Medical chiefs have called for a third party to help junior doctors secure a deal with the government. The Academy of Medical Royal Colleges has urged both parties to find a solution for the deadlock for the sake of patients and the wider NHS. It is after nearly 200,000 hospital appointments had to be rescheduled following the junior doctors' strike last week. The Academy has previously helped secure a deal between both sides back in 2016, which was over the introduction of a new contract. A group of Conservative MPs say they have reached a deal with the Prime Minister to change new rules in the illegal migration bill. It is after they allegedly threatened to revolt over the legislation. The amendment reportedly allows ministers to ignore European judges in certain situations. At least 78 people have been killed and dozens injured following a stampede at a school in Yemen as hundreds gathered to receive aid. The stampede took place during the distribution of charitable donations in the final days of Ramadan. Eyewitnesses say people wanted to reach the schoolyard before others, and some began falling onto the steps leading to the entrance. Videos online show a crowd of people shouting and reaching out to be pulled to safety. A rare hybrid solar eclipse has appeared over the Australian town of Exmouth. The country is one of the few places in the world that experienced a cosmic event. The sky turned dark for around 60 seconds, while the moon cast a 40-kilometre wide shadow over the area. Such event only occurs a few times per century. TV, online, DAB+ radio and on TuneIn. This is GB News. Now, though, it's back to Andrew and Bev.
Well, it's our big story today.
It is.
The government are beefing up their small boats legislation. Effectively, they're going to stop European judges intervening to block deportations of flights around there. That's what happened to the last flight. Early hours of the morning, an anonymous judge from the European Court blocked it. Be very popular, I think, don't you, Bev?
Yeah, I think it's cost us 17 million quid to get people on flights and then have them stopped. So this should be good news. The powers will be revealed today when the government publishes its amendments to the illegal migration bill.
There's been huge pressure on Rishi Sunak from the right of the Conservative Party, and it's been fuelled, frankly, by the Home Secretary, Suella Braverman, because she wants a hardline stance on the European Court of Human Rights. Of course, some Tory MPs want us to have no more to do with the European Court at all, but I don't think that's going to happen.
No. So joining us now is our political reporter, Olivia Utley. Good morning, Olivia.
There she is.
Good morning.
There you are. Good morning, Olivia. The Tories will definitely be claiming this as a win, and I imagine it would definitely be a vote winner.
Well, absolutely. It's a very interesting development. There's been a group of rebel backbench Tories on the right of the party who've been arguing to beef up the immigration legislation for quite a long time now. And today it looks like they have won. They've had to back down on a few of their other amendments, but this is the main one. And of course, it's very important to them because it would mean that judges wouldn't be able to do these pajama injunctions, as they're called by critics, which means that they can stop deportations at the very last minute when the flight is on the runway. It sounds a little bit from behind the scenes as though Suella Braverman has been allowing these rebels, maybe not helping them, but at least allowing them to build steam over the past few months. And it seems to have paid off because Rishi Sunak has agreed to the plan. Of course, this isn't by any means the end of the road, because we can expect these amendments to be held up not only by the courts, which of course we would expect, but also the Lords. And it could end up with a real power clash between the government and the Lords. Of course, Rishi Sunak has staked his reputation on stopping the boats. So if this legislation, this amended legislation is held up in the Lords, we can expect him to come down quite hard on the Lords, and we'll see a lot of ping-pong in the weeks and months ahead.
Olivia, this is exactly what the Prime Minister wants, though, doesn't he? He wants to fight with unelected peers. He wants to fight with the Labour Party that will oppose this because he thinks he's got the public on his side. Why on earth should European judges stick their nose in it? We've got our own Supreme Court. That's perfectly adequate. I rather thought the British judiciary was the envy of the world.
Well, absolutely. I think this does play into his hands quite nicely. Meanwhile, though, it looks as though Rishi Sunak is gearing up for another, not sure if we'd quite call it a fight, but an altercation perhaps with the moderates in his party, who have been arguing for a while now that there aren't enough safe and legal routes for genuine migrants to claim asylum in the UK. And it sounds as though Rishi Sunak might be considering allowing through some amendment from that side of the party, which would make it easier for genuine migrants to claim asylum in the UK. So it could be that he ends up sort of fighting a battle on both sides, but it might just be that actually the country at large, which thinks in a more nuanced way than perhaps some would expect, could agree with both camps of rebels, that they think that, yes, this legislation does need toughening up to stop people abusing our human rights legislation, or ECHR human rights legislation, and coming to the UK illegally, but also genuine migrants, genuine asylum seekers should be able to claim legal asylum in the UK. So it could be that this all suits Rishi Sunak quite nicely.
Can we go to Scotland as well, Olivia? Because Hamza Yousaf is taking all sorts of questions in the Scottish Parliament today. It's all going to be overshadowed by the extraordinary crisis that's engulfed the SNP. The Treasurer, who was arrested, resigning yesterday.
Yes, absolutely. I think we can expect another very difficult FMQs for Hamza Yousaf today. His first few weeks in office have been completely overshadowed by this fiasco, really. He gave his speech laying out his priorities for Scotland a few days ago, and of course all journalists were interested in was the turmoil going on inside the SNP. It said the SNP senior figures are now braced for the imminent arrest of Nicola Sturgeon. And of course, Hamza Yousaf still hasn't suspended her or Peter Murrell from the SNP party. So he's under a lot of pressure today, not the day to be the self-confessed Nicola Sturgeon continuity candidate.
It's would be an extraordinary development if Nicola Sturgeon, who until a few weeks ago was one of the most powerful politicians in Europe, if she is questioned by the police, potentially under caution or potentially arrested, because she did sign off those accounts, and the other two people who signed off the last accounts, Olivia, have already been arrested, her husband and the Treasurer.
Absolutely, and her claim that she didn't know about the £600,000, all of this rests on the £600,000 of funding which was raised in a crowdfunder to be used purely for campaigning for independence, and seems to have disappeared somehow into the SNP's general funding pot. And obviously Nicola Sturgeon, as leader of the SNP, should be expected to be across these details, but the fact that she is married to Peter Murrell obviously makes it all an awful lot worse for her. So we'll see what happens. Be very interesting. Keep a hawk eye on Scotland, because we could see the arrest of, as you say, one of the most powerful politicians in Europe until a few weeks ago.
OK, thank you, Olivia. Olivia down at Westminster. Did you see any of PMQs yesterday? We were hot-footing it from the building,
I did. Actually, it was one of the worst performances I think Keir Starmer's ever had.
Well, that's exactly what I was going to say. But also, it was rowdy beyond belief. And I got a message from my mother, who was at home watching GB News, morning mum, who gets so infuriated about the atmosphere in the House of Commons and how it alienates normal people when they're braying at each other like that.
When I've been in there, I mean, and it is like a baying mob.
Isn't it?
And it's intimidating.
Yes.
And it's particularly intimidating for women, and there's still a lot of sexist abuse goes in there. But I've got to say, Sunak was on fire yesterday, and I don't get it with Starmer. He's a lawyer, meant to be a clever lawyer. He doesn't seem to be able to think very quickly on his feet.
No.
It's scripted, and he sticks to it.
And I just, but it's so outdated, isn't it?
It is.
That format of
There's still
screaming
talk
at
of
each
having
other
having a circular chamber, which would make it less gladiatorial. If you notice, that's how it is in Scotland.
Yes, yeah, they need to. If they want to keep bringing the public with us in politics and involved in politics, they have to stop behaving like schoolboys.
I'm afraid to do.
Braying like donkeys and baying at each other. That was the words I was looking for.
Exactly.
Right, now, it takes a lot to unite fans of Man City and Man United.
But an article on the front page of The Sun says the badges of their football teams have been dubbed racist, which has created predictable uproar.
Brilliant front page of The Sun. I mean, all credit to you. Not saying it's a slow news day, but this is genius, isn't it? Paul Coit is with us, sports broadcaster.
Hello.
You must have looked at these badges so many times and it never occurred to you that they might reflect a slavery of our past.
I don't think they do, to be honest with you. I thought it was something to do with Blue Peter, to be honest with you, when I saw the three masts on the ship. But seriously, I think most people, if you weren't a fan of the clubs, would you know that there was a ship on there?
No.
I mean, there's so many other... the Plymouth have got a ship. Grimsby have got a trawler on the front. I don't think the trawler's anything to do with the slave trade.
No.
Swindon have a...
My own team.
Your team.
Do we have a ship?
You have a train on the front.
Well,
you have a
train. We're the town, the railwaymen.
That's it, yeah, of course. Tranmere Rovers have got a battleship. So really, this ship, it's to do, surely, with the Manchester Ship Canal. That's what it's all about.
But this is woke claptrap coming out of the Guardian newspaper, which is campaigning on this issue. These football teams didn't exist when the slave trade was operating.
No, we're talking around 1880. So obviously, I don't know whether the argument is the fact that because of the Manchester Ship Canal and the cotton mills, that the cotton came over from America, and therefore it was slaves in those days that harvested the cotton. I don't know whether that's the link, but it is. It's looking for something. It's a ship, and it's on the badge.
Talk about tenuous. Well, Guardian commentator Simon Hattonstone is the man with too much time on his hands, and he has questioned this symbol of the ship. It's a crime against humanity.
What crime against? I mean, it's just their football blooming teams who bring a lot of joy, a lot of pleasure.
And can we also say, if you want to connect football to slavery, let's talk about the fact that football is one of the greatest employers of black men.
Absolutely right.
And pays them beyond the wildest dreams of any of us.
I think the situation is nothing to do with what's going on now, but there we are. The badge is celebrating that, and it's not celebrating anything to do with the slave trade. And like we say, it's the Manchester Ship Canal. This is the history of Manchester. So that's the reason the ship is on there. I think the ship is there. A lot of people would notice that on the Manchester City badge, but there's a red devil. Is it glorifying Lucifer? That's what they're doing, those terrible Manchester United fans.
I see someone in The Sun has talked about Italian clubs. I wonder if any of their badges reflect the Roman Empire, which enslaved us, by the way.
Of course.
Are we going to get reparations and compensation?
Well, there's a fan of Manchester United that said a very similar thing, you know. Is that therefore because of the Romans? Are they going to be blamed as well because of it signifying that? It's nonsense. I mean, we could talk about Coventry City. They've got an elephant. What does that... You could look into anything and try and go, well, obviously, that's what they're trying to do.
Why have they got an elephant, Coventry?
Well, I did look into that, because I would always wonder why there was an elephant on Coventry City. That's the symbol of Coventry. I think it signifies strength.
Right.
I believe that's why it is. So why you would go with an elephant, but on the badge is an elephant.
A city, of course, that was rebuilt after the war, Second World War, because it was bombed so badly, maybe.
Still not sure why the elephant...
But I think Manchester City and Manchester United are going to tell the Guardian to get lost, aren't they?
I don't think that we're going to see the removal of a ship on a badge. Do you? I don't think it'll be happening soon.
No, I don't. No. I wouldn't have thought so.
No.
Let us know what you think, won't you? Especially if you're a Man United fan or a Man City fan. Is it safe to admit that you're a Man United born and bred fan on national TV?
I mean, it's just madness, isn't it? Which team are you, Paul?
I'm Tottenham Hotspur.
Oh, he's struggling apparently, bad.
Well, look,
they never do they?
Well, listen, this is the reason I'm here. I think you're just going to do Spurs baiting. We'll pretend he's going to talk about Manchester. We'll start pointing the finger about Spurs.
What has Tottenham got on their badge?
Is a cockerel on the top of a ball.
A cockerel.
A cockerel. It's all to do with Harry Hotspur. And there's actually, you know what? There was actually arguments about the fact that the cockerel had spurs actually on the feet of the cockerel. So therefore, people were saying, well, they're glorifying cockfighting. That's what it is. So there were arguments about that, whether the spurs should be removed from the legs of the cockerel. But what can you do? What can you do?
We're now going to have to look at football clubs in a completely different light, Paul, aren't we?
All there will be is just a flower for everyone. That's all there will be.
What a boring and vanilla world that will be.
But what's a great story for The Sun. I mean, you've got to laugh. It's a great talking point. I mean, as you say.
Matt and Mylene Klass in a bikini. Something for all the boys on the front page of The Sun today. Right, thank you, Paul. OK, Prince William and Kate will visit Birmingham today to meet future leaders and local businesses in the arts and creative industries.
Yeah, they're going to go to the Rectory, where the royal couple are going to meet designers, artists and players. I think they're going to go to that jewellery quarter, which is one of the biggest in Britain.
Oh, nice. Our West Midlands reporter, Jack Carson, joins us from Birmingham's jewellery quarter, as if by magic. What do they have planned for today's visit, Jack?
Well, I'll tell you what, I think someone's told Birmingham that the Prince and Princess are coming because the weather here is just absolutely beautiful. But yes, they are going to be here a little bit later on today. They're going to meet, as you mentioned, future business leaders, business owners, learn about what it's like to open and run your own business here, but also to learn about the creative industry sector. It's one of the biggest sectors here in Birmingham for employment. In the UK, across the UK, it's 2.3 million jobs are made from the creative sector. It's worth more than £100 billion to the UK economy. So it shows the interest that the Prince and Princess are taking in this industry. Of course, as we enter this digital age, it's one of those sectors that's likely just going to get bigger and bigger. And here in the jewellery quarter, it is of course massive to employment here. Over 40% of all jewellery made in the UK is made here in the jewellery quarters. And it's not only got obviously historical significance, but of course these creative industries are creating a future for it as well. So they're going to meet some playwrights, some artists here in the rectory behind me, and then they're going to go and have a game of interactive darts in the 180 Club below. It's one of these new kind of trending mix of nightlife and games where they're going to have some interactive darts with some of the people they're meeting, have a bit of fun, and then come and meet some crowds out here a little bit later on as well. There's a few people starting to turn up this morning, a couple of people with some Union Jack flags ready to wave at the barriers when the Prince and Princess do arrive. But of course this engagement is one of the last for them before the big coronation in a couple of weeks' time. We learnt yesterday, of course, Prince William is going to take a role in that as he pledges and swears that his fealty to King Charles by kneeling before him, kissing him on the right cheek, and also the crown as well. He's going to take part in that along with the Archbishop of Canterbury. It's tradition usually that all dukes do take part in that part of the coronation ceremony. So far, we've only had it confirmed that Prince William will take part in that. But as you mentioned, a little bit later on, the Prince and Princess are going to be here in Birmingham, learning all about the creative industry.
OK, thank you, Jack. Jack Carson there this morning. Lucky him. I'd quite like to be in the sunshine.
Yeah, that jewellery quarter is one of the most successful in the country.
That what is?
The jewellery quarter in Birmingham.
Oh,
Very successful. Right? Yeah, it really is. And we're getting some people already getting in touch about Rishi Sunak and the judges, European judges. John Presley says it looks like the Home Secretary, Suella Braverman's got her way. She's much more popular electorate than Rishi Sunak and stands head and shoulders above anyone else in the cabinet. It is a big step.
Do you know why? Do you know if I don't seem terribly excited about it? Let me tell you why. Because I feel like we've heard this a million times.
Yeah, well, that's slightly what I'm. Yeah.
And I've reached peak cynicism when it comes to this issue. I hope she can do something for the taxpayers' sake. We've got to be able to do something.
And it was outrageous that they were virtually on the runway, and a judge in Strasbourg in the early hours blocked it. And we weren't even told the name of the judge, the identity of the judge, what country they're from,
political allegiance of the judge.
Yeah, exactly. Completely anonymous, and that is outrageous. We've got our own judges. They're called. Yeah. It's called the Supreme Court. They can decide.
If this is successful, it will change everything. My understanding, it means that the flights to Rwanda
will be able to go ahead.
Will be greenlit. So let's see. We'll bring you all the latest on that as it happens this morning. Now, men are 3 times more likely to die by suicide. And amongst men, those in the construction industry are 3 times more likely than the national average.
A new campaign dubbed The Big Brew is encouraging tradespeople who experience these sort of issues to seek help and receive confidential therapy. Anna Riley has this report.
Tradespeople and construction workers face a variety of pressures, from tight contracts to long hours, physical demands, time away from loved ones, and now the rising cost of supplies. This in a male-dominated industry where many feel stigma in speaking out about their mental health has led to an increase in suicide rates within the sector in the UK.
Year on year, for the last 5 years, construction now has the highest suicide rate of any industry, which is devastating. I think it's 34 in every 100,000 now in construction are taking their own life. You compare that to the national average of 10.5 per 100,000. If you work in construction, you're now 4 times more likely to take your own life, which is shocking and devastating.
To support those working in trades, the Big Brew campaign encourages workers to speak out about their mental health and seek support.
If we can get men predominantly talking, you look at construction, it's 87% male. If we can break that, Steve, we can get guys talking, opening up about their feelings, not being seen as weak. then we can make some headway into improving that figure and seeing some change in the industry.
Lee Brown's a self-employed gas engineer with 27 years' experience. He sadly knows people in the industry who've taken their own lives and knows firsthand what it's like to struggle with mental health.
I felt like I was existing, not living. And then when I started going out on my own, I'm like, I haven't got that support network that I had when I was in the army or anything like that, or I had at college. I am now on my own. I don't have... Nobody in my family does what I do, so I didn't have anyone I could relate to, I didn't have anyone I could speak to. The only person I had really was my mum, who had some good... She'd run businesses, so I got good business advice, but not for construction industry. So I was making mistakes, I was making errors. And obviously you've got to take the responsibility for them, and they got me really down because I don't like making mistakes.
Along with Band of Builders, Lee also supports people in the industry to speak out about the difficulties they're facing.
The thing that hit me the most is when we knew somebody that took their own life. Like I've said before, she left her daughter behind, and that to me was just not acceptable. And that's when I thought, right, I'm going to do more. I'm going to get involved more. Rather than just saying I'm here, I'm actually going to go out there and tell people I'm here. And that's what we've been using our social media, using our networks, of saying to people, you know, I would much rather listen to your story than your eulogy. Come and talk to me.
With a push for recruitment in the construction industry, it's important now more than ever to make it one that's safe to work in, not just physically, but also mentally. Anna Riley, GB News, Huddersfield.
You know, yesterday, thank you, Anna, for that, we were talking about William Hague wading in, weren't we, to the WI trans
saying that they had
debate.
to accept trans women. My point was, what's it got to do with William Hague, former Tory leader?
Yeah.
Of course. Keep your nose out.
So basically what it is, I've written a piece about this following on from yesterday for the GB News website, so have a look if you've got 5 minutes with your coffee this morning. Basically, there's a faction within the WI who've called themselves the Women's Institute Declaration, and they are the ones saying we mustn't let trans women join our 108-year-old organisation because they will undermine what it is that we do. And they have actually done amazing campaigning over the years, the WI.
Yeah.
They were ahead of the game on so many issues.
Yep.
They were arguing about better education on HIV and AIDS in the 80s.
Yeah.
They were the first people to start campaigning about plastics.
Yeah.
In our season, like the 60s and 70s. They were really ahead of the game. Anyway, this story moves on today in the Mail. There's a trans activist who's now boasted about the fact she's a fighter, sort of semi-professional fighter, and she's boasted now about joining the WI. And she's drawn up a hit list of people that she says are TERFs, which is this awful phrase for women who argue that there should be women-only spaces, etc. And it's caused a huge amount of controversy and potential danger.
And is that what William Hague... So William Hague should be satisfied, because that's what he wants, of course. I mean, she boasts about her violent activities.
Yes, she does.
And it'll feed also in... A little later in the programme, we're going to be talking about Rosie Duffield, who's the Labour MP for Canterbury, who's been bullied by her own colleagues on the Labour benches, especially women, because of her principled stance on trans rights. She's in the J.K. Rowling faction. And we're talking to Sam Lister from The Express, who's coming in, who's done a big interview with her.
Yeah, and broke that story. Also this morning, still to come, the government is seeking new powers to ignore human rights rulings. Are they going to succeed? We'll find out in a moment.
Good morning. This is your latest weather update from the Met Office. My name's Alex Deakin, and it's a bit chilly out there first thing, but most of us will have a fine and sunny Thursday. Later on, some cloud and rain will trickle into the southeast courtesy of this weather front. But high pressure is still generally dominating, and around that high pressure, the winds coming in from the North Sea, bringing a chilly feel yet again, particularly on some of these North Sea coasts. A bit misty and murky in a few spots this morning, especially over the Pennines, but that will clear away. And generally, it's a fine and sunny day, maybe a bit misty too around some of the coast across Scotland. Come this afternoon, the cloud will start to increase initially across Norfolk and Suffolk, but that cloud spreading into southeast England by the end of the day, and a few showers likely here too. For most, though, it stays fine and sunny. Still that east-west temperature contrast. Chilly on the east coast, milder further west, with western Scotland again likely to be top of the temperature tree. Through this evening, though, we'll see a few more of those showers coming in from the east across southeast England initially, and then this finger of rain likely to linger as we head into Friday over parts of Lincolnshire, East Yorkshire, and maybe even into parts of Lancashire too. That'll keep the temperatures up with more cloud across England and Wales. Not as cold here this time tomorrow morning, but Scotland and Northern Ireland will again be chilly. A hint of blue on the chart, so perhaps again a touch of frost in parts of Scotland. A very different day tomorrow for England and Wales. Much more cloud, stuck under this rain band with the wind still from the North Sea. It's not going to feel too clever. Heavy showers likely further south, hit and miss with some sunny spells in between. But again, the sunniest weather will be for Scotland and Northern Ireland. Another cracking day here if you like spring sunshine, with temperatures again in Western Scotland 16, 17 degrees. Elsewhere feeling cooler under that weather front. That will push northwards as we head into the weekend, bringing increased chance of some showers and then a switch in wind directions, northerly winds bringing cooler conditions into next week.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
New to GB News is the Saturday 5.
Join us every Saturday from 8 p.m. as we debate the week's stories, controversies and issues.
With us 4, plus a special guest.
It's 5 times the opinion, 5 times the debate, and 5 times the fun. The Saturday 5. Saturday nights from 8. Only on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
You could wink at the end. I can't Britain's wink. Listening.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Very good morning. Thank you for watching us today. This is To The Point on GB News with me, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce.
We're taking on the judges. The government finally says it's going to take on new powers effectively to keep those European judges out of any decision to deport illegal migrants, which could finally mean that plane flies to Rwanda.
united in Manchester. Fans of both cities' clubs have laughed off claims that their team's badges are linked to slavery because they've got ships in them.
And I don't think the Guardian, which is campaigning, has noticed that Manchester has a very famous ship canal. Does he or doesn't he go? Dominic Raab, the Deputy Prime Minister, there's been a report we're expecting in the next couple of days over whether he bullied senior civil servants.
And coronation snub. Why has the late Queen's lady-in-waiting not been invited to Charles's big day? We talked to a royal confidant. Let us know your thoughts on all of our talking points this morning. Email us gbnews@gbnews.uk. But first, here is your morning's news with Rory Smith.
Thank you, Bev. The latest from the GB newsroom. Sir Jake Berry has branded Westminster's complaints system as outdated. The former Conservative chairman says it was wrong for the Deputy Prime Minister Dominic Raab to continue in his job while under investigation. Speaking to ITV, Sir Jake said the government needs to rethink how it deals with these sort of allegations, both against the ministers and members of Parliament. His comment comes amid reports that senior Ministry of Justice officials could quit if Dominic Raab is cleared of the allegations. Medical chiefs will hold a formal ballot for national strike action in England for the first time in its history over funding, pay and conditions. Earlier, the Academy urged junior doctors and the government to find a solution to the deadlock for the sake of patients and the wider NHS. Nearly 200,000 hospital appointments had to be rescheduled following the junior doctor strike action last week. The Academy has previously helped secure a deal between both sides back in 2016 when the introduction of a new contract sparked strike action. At least 78 people have been killed and dozens injured following a stampede at a school in Yemen as hundreds gathered to receive aid. The stampede took place during the distribution of charitable donations in the final days of Ramadan. Eyewitnesses say people wanted to reach the schoolyard first and some people began falling on the steps leading to the entrance. A suspected Russian spy ship has been seen at sites off the coast of Britain as parts of plans to sabotage key energy infrastructure. That's according to broadcasters in Denmark, Sweden, Finland and Norway, who claim the vessel is looking around wind farms for possible vulnerabilities to exploit in the event of a war with the West. The report says the ship sailed around the Baltic Sea and the North Sea for a month and is part of a fleet disguised as scientific research vessels. Experts say Ukraine is facing an unprecedented number of Russian cyber attacks. A report by the European Cyber Conflict Research Initiative says that despite Kyiv's resilience, the cyber threats could create some concerning precedents. They also say Russia's cyber threat extends beyond Ukraine, with the UK and allies also being targeted. The NATO chief has visited Ukraine for the first time since Russia's invasion. Jens Stoltenberg visited Kyiv to pay his respects to soldiers who died in the war and show his support as the country prepares for a counter-offensive. He also reviewed damaged Russian military equipment that is displayed on a central square in the capital. The first so-called cannabis card has launched in the UK. The Relief Medical Cannabis Card is for medical cannabis patients so they can show law enforcement when taking their treatment in public. It is after a study by the service found that just over half of the population is still unaware that medical cannabis is legal in the UK. A research group has found more than 1,300 homeless people died across the UK last year. The Museum of Homelessness said the figure was up by 85% since its work began 4 years ago. It says the government needs to address the immediate crisis and the lack of social housing that causes it. The Levelling Up department says its plans include a £186 million boost for services to help those with addictions and up to £53 million for suitable and stable accommodation. University students' complaints have hit a record high. The Office for National Independent Adjudicator received 2,850 complaints from students in England and Wales last year. Nearly 2 in 5 of the complaints were about academic appeals, including problems with marking and final degree results. The demand for electric cars has dropped by nearly 2/3 since the start of last year. New figures by Auto Trader show a 65% drop in inquiries for the vehicles last month compared with January last year. The company says it is due to the cost of living crisis, higher interest rates for borrowing and the rise in energy prices. A rare hybrid solar eclipse has appeared over the Australian town of Exmouth. The country is one of the few places in the world that experienced a cosmic event. The sky turned dark for about 60 seconds when the moon cast a 40-kilometre wide shadow over the area. Such event occurs only a few times per century. This is GB News. We'll bring you more as it happens. Now, though, it's back to Andrew and Bev.
Big story today. It's on the front page of the Times of quite a few newspapers. European judges who have regularly blocked deportation flights of illegal migrants, they're going to be kept out of it in future because the government is going to toughen up that Stop the Boats legislation. Good, if they do it.
That's right. The powers are going to be revealed today when the government publishes its amendments to the illegal migration bill.
There's been huge pressure on the Prime Minister from a certain wing of the Tory party to take a much more hardline approach, and we know that hardline approach is shared by the Home Secretary, Suella Braverman.
So, joining us now to discuss is Refugee and Asylum Rights Director at Amnesty International UK, Steve Valdez-Simmons. Good morning, Steve. What do you make of this latest twist in this particular tale? I imagine you see this as bad news.
I do see it as bad news. It is a very authoritarian move by our government to exclude courts from controlling whether governments act according to law. It's rather ironic, really, that this happens in relation to this country's management of its asylum system. Because, of course, the reason why we have an asylum system and why people flee and seek asylum is precisely because other regimes elsewhere do not respect courts and the rule of law where they are. And the more we encourage that in an increasingly desperate and difficult world, I'm afraid we'll see more people who seek asylum because regimes will follow the UK's lead now in ignoring courts or seeking to exclude them. So it is a desperately bad situation.
But, Steve, this comes down to who governs Britain. The Prime Minister decided, with the backing of the Home Secretary, that he doesn't want European judges thinking they know better. We've got a perfectly good judicial system in Britain. The Supreme Court is envied. It's impartial. And if they block the flight, so be it. But why would we allow European judges to overrule a British court and a British Parliament?
Well, can we just correct something?
Go on.
The bill that is being amended to do what we're talking about today already excludes the Supreme Court, the Court of Appeal and the High Court from doing this. Our judges are being excluded from all of this by this bill. And what this is about to do is to exclude the court that's responsible for the European Convention to which we are still a party from doing its job too.
I think that's not quite right, though, Steve, is it? Because isn't it going to say, this bill, that judges will only be able to stop a flight in exceptional circumstances?
What this bill says is that no judicial review action can prevent the removal of somebody. What can happen is someone can ask the Home Secretary not to remove them on the basis that they will come to some very serious
irreversible harm before anyone could do anything to correct it if she goes ahead. And she can decide whether she accepts even to consider the claim or not. And if she does accept to consider the claim, then not the High Court, not the Supreme Court, but potentially an employment tribunal judge may be allowed, if she permits it, to reflect upon whether she's come to the right decision. If you think that is a way of any form of real judicial scrutiny of the powers of the Home Secretary, then I think you are deluding yourself.
Well, this has got a long way to go, of course, Steve. It will go to the House of Lords, this legislation. The House of Lords is stuffed full of retired judges, so there will be a serious legal input into this.
Well, I'm sure there will be lots of scrutiny in the House of Lords. The House of Commons, of course, has been largely excluded from much scrutiny because this bill has been rushed through that place. And indeed, there is now only one day left for that place to even consider the amendments, along with the rest of the bill, that we'll possibly see tomorrow. The House of Lords, of course, as we all know, traditionally, not necessarily always, but traditionally sees itself as being permitted to try and persuade the government to think again if it is doing something that that place thinks is wrong. But the government has a majority in the House of Commons, and it seems hell-bent on passing these disastrous laws.
OK, thank you, Steve. Director at Amnesty International, Steve Valdez-Simmons there.
Well, House of Lords is a revising chamber, that's its job.
You know what?
And this government has been defeated more times in the House of Lords than any government in modern history.
Yeah. Even if you don't agree with what Steve Valdez-Simmons says there, a lot of our viewers won't, he does make a really strong case, doesn't he, as to why this may not be the solution. So what is? Well, as usual, lawyers do very well out of these situations.
Yeah, well, I for one hope good luck to the Home Secretary and power to her elbow on this, because we've got to sort the number of
100%,
small boats crossing the
100%.
channel.
I couldn't agree more, but I'm just concerned when you listen to it laid out like that we've got more hurdles, and it will drag on, and it costs us taxpayers a lot of money. Now, new NHS figures revealed by the Labour Party show that 42% of patients are waiting up to 6 months to see a cancer doctor.
That's terrible. Of course, the strikes aren't going to help, Bev, are they? No. The figures also show some patients waiting up to 9 months for a test or scan and 2 years for a diagnosis.
Let's hear more from Olivia Parry. She's a nutritionist and cancer survivor. Good morning, Olivia. Just give us, if you don't mind, a little potted history of your personal journey with cancer.
Yeah, absolutely. So it was when I was 35. I'd had no symptoms at all, and the screening process caught up with me. So I went in for it's called colposcopy, where they put a camera and they have a closer look, and immediately they saw that there was something wrong. So the next morning at 7:30, I went in to have a biopsy. And I woke up 5 days later in intensive care being told I was really lucky to be alive. I'd had a massive hemorrhage and major surgery. So basically, it completely came out of the blue. I had no symptoms whatsoever. And the NHS saved my life, and I'll be forever grateful to them.
And how long ago was that, Olivia?
That was 16 years ago. So yes, I was 35 and I'm now 52. So, health is so important. And I think, sometimes we take for granted just how much the NHS does. And yes, this story is very pertinent to me, because there was a girl who was having treatment at the same time as me, and she was only 29, and she was misdiagnosed, and it was too late. I mean, mine was stage 1B, so it hadn't actually spread, which is easier to treat, and hers had spread. So, it really didn't work for her. So, yeah.
Olivia, if these shocking figures, which we're seeing now, 6 months wait, if that had been the case for your time 16 years ago, putting it brutally, you probably wouldn't be with us anymore.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, it just doesn't bear thinking about. But on that, on the story, and clearly the figures are right. But I actually have a friend who had a blood test, and within 2 weeks they've seen a specialist and they've got a scan fixed up. So, you know, I'm sure there are lots of cases where cancer treatment has been delayed, but there are also plenty of stories where it has worked. So let's not forget how wonderful they are.
I think it's often a postcode lottery, Olivia. It depends where you are, which particular NHS trust.
Yeah, but basically for me, the reason I set up my business as a nutritionist and a health coach is to help people get a healthy weight. The consultant said to me, the reason you survived that trauma, you know, the hemorrhage and all of that, was because you were slim and fit. And sadly, 2/3 of the population are now overweight or have obesity. So it's a real risk to cancer. So people can, you know, there's a lot that they can do getting help to get to a healthy weight and reduce the burden on the NHS.
What this inevitably means now, Olivia, these wait times of 6 months or more for cancer treatment, is that those who can afford it will go and find private doctors to treat them. Do you see that we're now getting a health system which is very much two-tier?
I think you had a professor on in one of the earlier programmes saying that the NHS is nowhere near what it was in 1948, and he's absolutely true. You know, he's absolutely right. But things like cancer and heart disease, I mean, I do have private healthcare, but the doctors didn't even want me to use it. They said you'll be much safer in the main hospital. We've got an eye on you. You've got a history. Private healthcare tends to treat things like, you know, hips and knees and those kind of joint issues that, you know, it's not urgent. But I really think the NHS, they're there for us in times of need for cancer and heart disease. So I really think there needs to be a major overhaul. I mean, I've commented up to your wonderful programme before on many health issues. And the nurses, you know, I totally support they need a better terms and conditions. I don't know if it's not just throwing more money at them. It all needs to be changed, overhauled to bring it up to the modern day. But the fact is, you know, when we had a pandemic, they found the money, the government found the money. So it can be done.
Yeah. OK, thank you, Olivia. Congratulations on staying well. Olivia Parry there.
It's great.
She looks great, doesn't she?
It really does.
You know, if one of my family had cancer, you would just throw what you could at it, wouldn't you?
Anything. And of course, Olivia's saying about we're not the NHS we were in 1948. Of course, in 1948, people didn't survive cancer.
That's right. And we didn't have the obesity epidemic.
And we didn't. And people didn't live to 80. What is the average age now? 82 or something like that. I mean, people died much younger. My grandma had cancer when I was a junior school boy. I mean, it was incurable. That was what it was in the 60s.
Yeah. Times have changed, and yet the NHS doesn't seem to have moved on with it.
Now, it's a private funeral being held today for everybody loves him, don't they? TV entertainer Paul O'Grady. I'm still finding it hard to believe we're never going to see anymore. He died at home suddenly, of course, aged 67. He'd had heart issues.
The procession will be passing through Paul's local village. There'll be a guard of honour. And our national reporter, Theo Chicomba, is live in Adlington for us now. What else are the locals putting on there to give Paul O'Grady a fitting send-off, Theo?
Yes, good morning. Well, the local school is planning something, as I understand, and they'll be this afternoon, but the road where I am at the moment, Roman Road, which is in the heart of Aldington, in this quaint village in Kent, where we're expecting thousands of people to come and show their respect for Paul O'Grady, who was much loved. He was very successful in the 1980s in the gay scene, and of course his persona, Lily Savage, and after that he went on to have a very successful career in television and radio, and for years he's had a love for animals in particular, and that's something that's going to be highlighted here as the procession makes its way through to the church here in the heart of Aldington. And this morning I've spoken to the first person, I believe, who's come here from Sittingbourne to pay her respects, and this is what she had to say.
O'Grady done a fantastic job for the community and Battersea. He was a wonderful, wonderful man. I've actually got 3 rescue dogs, and I lost my husband last year. And I just think it's a nice kindness of respect to be here today to show how appreciated that the man was. He just lifted everybody. He was a lovely, lovely man. And I think he deserves a terrific send-off with everyone here, locally and in Kent, to support him. And the connection for us was really Battersea, where he helped there and, rehoming dogs. We've always had rescue dogs. Dogs need a chance in life, and I think poor O'Grady actually showed people that. His personality, I think, made people go and get dogs and rehome them. And look at him, how many did he rehome at his home? I think the last one was Sausage, and I think in his new show that's just been aired, I think he would have took, there was a lovely big black dog with leg problems. I think he would have took her, but obviously circumstances, he couldn't. But no, I think he had a very lovely love of dogs, and me and my husband did too. We love rescuing animals. I left home this morning at 6:30, and I was determined that I was going to be in to show my respects. And as you can see with cars pulling up, I think everybody's the same. He was a loved man, and we all want to show him how much that he was loved.
Well, as you heard there from Lynn, there'll be plenty of other people who will be coming to do just that, to show their respect. He was 67 years old, died of sudden cardiac arrhythmia last month at his home, and earlier this week his husband posted a message saying he was overwhelmed by the outpouring of love that he has received since the passing of our beloved Paul. And so there'll be many people who will be here to do exactly that, as he's been a huge part of the community here for around 20 years.
OK, thank you, Theo. Theo Chukumba there in Kent.
And Battersea Dogs Home staff are going to do a guard of honour. Isn't that lovely?
It's lovely, isn't it? Do you think
Really
is it the staff or is it the cats and the dogs?
He loved all of them, didn't he?
I imagine there'll be loads of animals down there.
I interviewed him when I was on The Time as Lily Savage in full drag. Terrifying. You wouldn't cross you wouldn't cross Lily Savage, ever.
No, you wouldn't. Now, still to come, Elon Musk is hoping to relaunch his SpaceX flight to the moon this afternoon. Is he going to be second time lucky? We'll find out.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference. And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat.
Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better.
Crop failures, famine, war, suffering on a scale completely unimaginable.
We are putting the cart before the horse. As Charles I said at the scaffold, he was the true defender of liberty.
Yeah, I've completely derailed the conversation.
Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
It's 10:25. You're with To The Point on GB News with Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner.
Now, apparently a lot of people are getting very excited about this. I am not one of them. SpaceX is finally launching its Mars-bound Starship craft into orbit.
You'll recall the first effort didn't happen. It's Elon Musk's big rocket, if you pardon the expression, and it's due to take off, if that's the right, so launch from Texas later this afternoon.
So I'm now flanked by two little boys at heart who are very excited about this rocket.
Yeah.
So sell it to me, Tom Harwood. Why should I care?
This is the biggest rocket ever
right.
developed. This is a rocket that is twice the height of Nelson's column. It's taller than Big Ben, and it has been designed with one thing in mind: getting human beings to Mars.
Yeah.
The most extraordinary achievement if we get there. And the crucial thing about this rocket, unlike any rocket that has ever flown before, taller than any rocket that has ever flown before, but crucially made of two parts that are both recoverable. Not just recoverable, but designed to be rapidly reusable. Now, that means once it flies off, you've got the booster on the bottom half and what's called the Starship proper on the top half. They both fly off. The booster lands back down. Now, we've seen SpaceX land its Falcon 9 boosters before, but the top bit of the Falcon 9 they throw away.
No, I
don't think she noticed that bit, Tom.
Lots of people will remember the incredible scene. I think it was back in 2018 of Falcon Heavy, which was then SpaceX's largest rocket, firing up, and then these two boosters landing in synchronized beauty back on the SpaceX launch pad. The crucial point about this is, up until SpaceX came along, whenever we fired a rocket into space, we threw it away afterwards. It was the most wasteful program. Only governments could do it. This innovation and the potential for what's known as a rapidly reusable rocket, whereby instead of like the space shuttle that would take 6 months of renovation to fly again, if we can crack this, if this works and we learn enough from this test today, we would be able to simply get this rocket back up into space by refueling it like an aeroplane. It will change the game for space travel.
How long does it take to get to Mars?
Oh, a very long time, about 6 months.
It's a long time.
I feel like you've all gone mad.
But could we survive on Mars? Could we survive even for a minute on Mars? We don't know, do we?
We've survived on the moon, which is a lot harder to do. The moon doesn't have an atmosphere.
When you say we survived on the moon...
Well, Neil Armstrong did all right. I met Buzz Aldrin, who was the second man on the moon. He's still going strong,
here's the thing, though. The last time we landed on the moon was December 1972. It was before Britain joined the EEC.
Oh,
it was
don't have to bring that
over
up.
50 years ago. It seems like there's been some stagnation in this field up until now.
It's a complete and utter waste of money.
Well, if we look at what, for example, the Apollo programme did, the advances in technology that were created off the back of that, some of the tech that we use in our computers and our phones, things that affect our everyday lives were found through that exploration, through that discovery. And having space there as the next frontier is something that can excite and inspire the next generation of scientists.
You haven't convinced
It's a
her.
huge deal.
You haven't convinced her.
I've got so much to say about phallic fixation. Maybe it's a male thing, or this zooming off the biggest one in the
We've
world.
had some very famous female astronauts, including from Britain.
We have indeed, but also, parallel to this, there's a sort of rejuvenation in space travel going on now. And at the same time, separately, NASA is announcing their next moon mission as part of the Artemis programme, which will put the first woman on the moon this decade.
Which won't be Bev Turner.
It will not, because most women are just at home doing normal stuff, like keeping the show on the road and working and feeding the kids and cleaning the houses and all the stuff that we have to do. We haven't got time, Andrew Pearce, to think about whether we can go and live on Mars.
No. Now, Lady Pamela Hicks is the oldest living descendant of Queen Victoria. She was a bridesmaid at the Queen's wedding, and she was at the coronation of the Queen, and she was at the coronation of George VI, the Queen's father. We rather thought she'd be at the coronation of Charles III.
Well, apparently today it's been revealed that she's not on the guest list of the King's coronation because it was based on meritocracy, not aristocracy.
So we're going to talk now to Hugo Vickers, who's a royal expert, a bit of a royal legend, actually. Hugo, I was pretty amazed that she's not invited because her father, of course, was Lord Mountbatten. Broadlands, the family home, was where the Queen and Prince Philip began their honeymoon. And, of course, Mountbatten was a great confidant of Prince Charles.
Yes. Well, two things. One of which, by the way, she was not at the coronation of 1937. She was too young, but her Patricia was. But that's not your mistake. That's her daughter's mistake, I'm afraid.
OK.
Second, this is a state occasion and not a family occasion, and a great number of members of the royal family that you would expect to be there won't be there. And of course, equally, a great number of the aristocracy won't be there. But I think you've hit on one point. If Lord Mountbatten had still been alive, she certainly would be there because he'd make sure she was. But, you know, given that you can only have 2,000 people in the Abbey instead of 8,000, they've got to look to the people who are part of the legislation, representative of this country as it is in 2023. And I'm afraid the aristocracy are the ones who've gone out of the window.
How do you think she's reacted? Because her daughter said Mum's taking it in her stride, but her daughter would say that. Do you think she's I think she must be disappointed, Hugo.
I'm not sure she's disappointed at all. She's 94 years old. It's a very long service. She would have to be there at the absolute latest by 10 o'clock. She wouldn't get out again until way after 1 o'clock. I don't think she's going to be worried about not being there. She can watch it all on the television. And, of course, that's the real point, Andrew, that television cameras will cover this coronation absolutely splendidly, and it can be beamed all over the world, and billions of people can take part. So forget those disappointed 6,000 people. I keep meeting disgruntled hereditary peers, as you can imagine, and others who are not going to be who think they have an inalienable right to be there. Unfortunately, they don't. It's going to be different.
It's going to be pared down a little, isn't it, Hugo? We were told as well, just because of the times that we're living in, with the cost of living crisis that we're all experiencing. Do you think it will still have the magnificence that we would expect from such an occasion?
I certainly hope so. I think the King actually got it spot on, because he originally put out a statement saying he wanted to be more modest. And I'm told he's absolutely delighted that a number of people, myself included, have said, well, you may want to be modest. We all want to be magnificent. I mean, we do these things extremely well in this country. I mean, look how the world watched in fascination the lying in state, the state funeral and committal of the Queen. I think they were really interested in the ceremonial aspects and what they meant. And probably it was the first time that many people would have been confronted with that. And the coronation is a fantastic opportunity for all that and more. So let's hope it is magnificent. I sincerely hope so. I shall be very disappointed if it isn't.
Where will you be, Hugo?
I will be outside Westminster Abbey with a certain media company and doing my best to identify the people coming in, which is about the only thing I can do. I obviously would have spotted Lady Pamela if she'd been there. I shall certainly spot some other interesting figures, I suspect. I'll tell you one interesting figure who'll be there will be a young boy who was he's a grown-up man in his 80s now, who was a page at the coronation. He was a page to the Lord Chancellor who didn't know any young men, asked the Duke of Norfolk, could he provide a boy? And the Duke of Norfolk provided a young boy called Andrew Parker Bowles. And he will be there, of course, because he's got 3 grandchildren carrying his ex-wife's train. So that's rather an interesting connection.
That's a nice
fascinating.
Twist, isn't
Hugo
it?
Vickers, he knows it all, you know. Hugo, thanks so much for joining us. Hugo Vickers.
Where will you be?
I'm going to be at a street party with my partner, and I'm really looking forward to it.
Yeah, me too. I'll be at a street party with my mum in Henley, close the roads, get all the kids out.
Be lovely.
Yeah, will be great. Let's hope for the weather. But coming up next, we're going to be discussing a new recommendation for better care for disabled children in care homes. That's after your morning's news.
Thank you, Bev. At 10:34, I'm Rory Smith in the GB newsroom. Sir Jake Berry has branded Westminster's complaint system as outdated.
The former Conservative chairman says it was wrong for the Deputy Prime Minister Dominic Raab to continue in his job while under investigation. Speaking to ITV, Sir Jake said the government needs to rethink how it deals with these sort of allegations, both against the ministers and members of Parliament. His comment comes amid reports that senior Ministry of Justice officials could quit if Dominic Raab is cleared of the bullying allegations. A suspected Russian spy ship has been spotted at sites off the coast of Britain as parts of plans to sabotage key energy infrastructure. It is claimed the vessel was looking around wind farms for possible vulnerabilities to exploit in the event of a war with the West. A report says the ship sailed around the Baltic Sea and the North Sea for a month and is part of a fleet disguised as scientific research vessels. At least 78 people have been killed and dozens injured following a stampede at a school in Yemen as hundreds gathered to receive aid. Cash donations were being handed out in the building in the final days of Ramadan. Eyewitnesses say people rushed to get the donations, leading people to fall on the school steps. Those responsible for organising the event have been detained. An investigation is underway. The Academy of Medical Royal Colleges has urged junior doctors and the government to find a solution to the deadlock for the sake of patients and the wider NHS. Nearly 200,000 hospital appointments had to be rescheduled following the junior doctors' strike action last week. The Academy has previously helped secure a deal between both sides back in 2016 when the introduction of a new contract sparked strike action. And a rare hybrid solar eclipse has appeared over the Australian town of Exmouth, one of the few places in the world that experienced a cosmic event. The sky turned dark for around 60 seconds when the moon cast a 40-kilometre wide shadow over the area. Events like this one only occur a few times per century. TV, online, DAB+ radio and on TuneIn, this is GB News.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for gold and silver investment.
Let's take a look at today's markets. The pound will buy $1.2434 and €1.1338. The price of gold, that's at £1,606.24 per ounce. And the FTSE 100, that's sitting at 7,886 points.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News, investments that matter.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Deebs & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
First and foremost, I'm a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Hello, I'm Calvin Robinson. Do not miss my Common Sense Crusade Saturdays at 7 p.m. Join me for some in-depth discussions on faith. Is that not the start of the slippery slope? It's very much so. And the big moral questions of the day. I'm baffled.
You've got some nerve.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Is the People's Channel.
Very good morning. Thank you for joining us. It's 10:40. This is To The Point on GB News with me, Bev Turner, and Andrew Pearce. Now, a new report published by the Child Safeguarding Practice Review says that health and education watchdogs need to carry out joint inspections of residential settings to avoid appalling harm.
There was a review last year which found a culture, it's terrible, isn't it? A culture of abuse and harm at residential care homes for children who've already got complex health needs.
That's right. Let's hear more now from Stephen Kingdom, Campaign Manager for Disabled Children's Partnership. Good morning, Stephen. Give us a little bit more information about this really disturbing report.
Thank you. Thank you for covering this important story. So the report follows, as you say, report last year of abuse in homes in Doncaster, where children suffered quite unbelievable and inhumane abuse in a setting where they should have been receiving care and being looked after. So this report looks at the longer term and national implications and lessons to be learned from those terrible events. It focuses, I think, on two areas really. One is actually the need for better support for disabled children and their families in the community, and a better understanding of their needs, so that actually fewer children need to go into residential care of this time. But then secondly, it focuses on, for those children who do need to go into residential care, how we can make sure that is safe and provides them with the support they need. And that includes making sure that the children have a voice. Many of these children are non-verbal, but they still have opinions, they still have a voice, and they still need to be heard. So there's a key focus on advocacy and giving the children a voice. There's a key focus, as you said, about inspection and oversight of the system. And I think the third area I'd highlight is the focus on workforce and ensuring there is a sufficient and skilled workforce to support these children.
I can't think of anything worse than having a disabled child, putting them in the care of a residential setting, and then going home from that setting, saying goodbye to your child, and knowing that they may not only not be safe, but they might be being deliberately abused. Do you know how many people are actually found guilty of these sorts of crimes?
I don't, I think, I'm afraid, the answer to that, but there is a criminal investigation continuing after the Doncaster cases, and I think it will be, I really hope that the children's stories are heard in court and justice is done.
Well, so do we, Stephen. Absolutely have our backing with that. I think it's a really important point, and it might not affect that many people in the grand scheme of things, but boy, does it matter that it's taken care of and that these people are looked after.
But they're vulnerable by definition.
Absolutely. Stephen, thank you so much. Stephen Kingdom there from the Campaign Manager for Disabled Children's Partnership.
We're going to talk newspapers now. We've got fabulous Sam Lister, editor of the Daily Express, and Ben Glaze, who's deputy editor of the Daily Mirror. Sam, every time you come in here, you're on the front page, and you've done it again.
You know, Andrew, I always say my best stories come when I'm
Quite right. Show that to the cameras, because you've got a good story
here.
Yeah,
absolutely. And I think the picture illustrates this. It's a picture of Labour's Rosie Duffield and the Conservative MP Miriam Keyes. And they've been demonised by trans extremists. And I think most of your viewers will see, if they look at that picture, that these are just very lovely, normal women who are hardworking and are just trying to protect women's rights. And I think I want to say thank you actually for talking about this issue, because the BBC has studiously ignored this morning and last night, and that shows why it's so important that GB News exists to talk about these issues. But the reason I wanted to talk to these two together was because back in January, they were a lightning rod for abuse in the Commons chamber. They were heckled and abused by Labour MPs.
So this is Labour MPs abusing one of their own number?
Yeah, one of their own. So Rosie was speaking out, Labour MPs, Ben Bradshaw and Lloyd Russell-Mole were heckling her. And then Miriam got up to speak, and Lloyd Russell-Mole crossed the chamber and sat and stared at her.
He did.
And it was so intimidating that actually other male MPs on the Conservative side saw what was going on and went to sit by her in a kind of show of solidarity because it was so awful. And so I just thought they're a lightning rod for the abuse that women face when they speak out about these issues. And that's why I was so keen to talk to them. And basically, they've kind of said, you know, we want to come across the political divide because women's rights are so important, and that's why we're working together on this. And that's, you know, so we've...
Women-only space is a big issue for both of them.
Single-sex spaces, they want protection, so they want toilets to be single-sex, changing rooms, hospital wards, single-sex hospital wards, very basic things that all women should have the right to access.
I read the other day that the number of people in mixed wards is at a record high.
Yeah.
And I remember Jeremy Hunt, when he was Health Secretary, a decade ago saying they were going to be banned.
Yeah, and we also saw earlier this week about the fact there's about 40 sexual assaults per week in the UK within NHS settings. So
absolutely.
We're seeing the results of some of these quite relaxed attitudes, aren't we, to gender division. Was it difficult to get this, Sam? Did they want to collaborate?
It's taken me months to...
I bet it has.
Because every time they speak out, they get more abuse. So it's very difficult for them to put their head above the parapet. Because, you know, why would you want to open yourself up to a fresh wave of abuse? Yeah. But I think they realise that actually this is so important that they've got to kind of do this. And we've got the local elections coming up.
Yeah.
And the point they want to make is actually local elections are quite crucial. Your councillor has a responsibility, has powers over these things. There are changing rooms in sports facilities. They have safeguarding responsibilities in schools. You know, local councillors they do have a role to play in protecting women's rights. And so when they knock on your door asking for your vote, ask them about this issue. And I think it is a complicated issue. A lot of people I speak to say, well, why should we care? It's a fringe issue. We don't really understand it. We don't know why we should be bothered about it. But actually, you know, if your mum's going to hospital and she cannot be treated on a single-sex ward, that's something that you're going to be upset about. Yeah.
Ben, why has the Labour Party got itself into quite such a mess on this issue, the trans issues? Because Rosie Duffield is a very brave figure, in my view, but to be demonised by her own colleagues in the Commons chamber, and I remember when Keir Starmer was campaigning in Kent, she's got a Kent seat, he didn't even go near her.
That's right, she's the MP for Canterbury. Actually, the Labour Party's only MP.
Only MP in Kent, and the Labour leader didn't go near her when he was campaigning in Kent.
That's
insulting.
It's a very bad relationship between the leader of the opposition's office, including Keir Starmer himself, and Rosie Duffield, because she has been brave in speaking out about these issues where, frankly, other MPs...
You shouldn't have to be brave,
not
though.
to tread. No, you shouldn't.
You shouldn't have to be brave. You should be allowed to say what you want without receiving death threats.
I know when we write about trans issues, you know, there's a sort of joking off, tin hats on, you get ready for the backlash. But, that, you know, what MPs get for speaking out, and J.K. Rowling and people like that, it's 100 times worse than what we as the conduits of that get in terms of abuse. And when you look at the list of asks in Sam's stories, the 5 key demands, just looking at them, they do seem like common sense.
Just remind us what some of them are, Ben.
So the single-sex spaces must be maintained for dignity and safety, particularly toilets, changing rooms, rape crisis centres, domestic violence refuges and hospital wards. I mean,
who can disagree
with that?
Can
argue with that? Children protected in schools with support to be happy in their bodies, and separate changing rooms and toilets for boys and girls. Well, you know, I was at school 30 years ago, and it just wouldn't...
Yeah, I know. Inconceivable.
You can't conceive that this would have even been an issue a few decades later.
I have a daughter that doesn't go to school, doesn't go to the toilet in school because it's mixed. One of the ones that they use is mixed.
Because she doesn't want to be with the boys. She literally comes through
the door and runs for a wee every day because she doesn't want to be in the room.
Really?
Amazing.
And some of the other demands, then, language protected with words like mother and woman used instead of parent or person. Again, seems common sense. And women's sport must remain for female-born competitors to ensure fairness. Well, I think as well, not just fairness, but safety as well. Because if you're talking about rugby, you know, if you've got a trans woman who was born a man, well, they're physically going to be that much bigger anyway than the women they're playing against, which in something like sport is
and they have and also, if they're perhaps in weightlifting or something like that, they've got an advantage because of the strength issue. Sam, how much trouble will Rosie Duffield get into with the party whips who are in charge of discipline for working so closely with a Tory MP on the front page of a newspaper that doesn't censor about the Labour Party. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I think almost they just don't really.
They've given up on them.
They've given up on it. And actually, when I contacted Labour, they just didn't want to comment on this. I mean, we've got a second story where we look at her issues with the Labour Party, and she talks about a kind of London-centric cabal that essentially controls the Labour Party. That's very close to Keir Starmer's office. That's very close to the ruling NEC. And because they are all linked to LGBT Labour and really, really are opposed to everything she says on this issue, she's just basically been left completely isolated. And she says she's been hounded and harassed, and that her own party is content to let that happen. I mean, it's very.
It is so extraordinary because under the auspices of sort of being kind, the Labour Party and the left are just being manipulated, aren't they, by this sort of trans-industrial complex. There's a lot of money to be made out of people changing their gender, and they're on drugs for life. There are a lot of kind of pernicious, perverse financial incentives behind this whole thing. We're talking about single-sex spaces, which really matter. But behind all of this, there are some quite dark forces at work. Aren't the Labour Party smart enough to work out that they're being played by jumping on the bandwagon?
I'm not so sure it's that they're necessarily being played. I think that they're finding it very difficult to balance competing rights, as some organisations are. You know, it's not just the Labour Party that's sort of battling with this. And as Sam's piece... the headline on the spread inside one person's rights must not override another's. I mean, that is true, isn't it? That if you try to be fair to one group, well, is that going to alienate? Is that going to be unfair to another group? And that's something that the Labour Party is struggling to deal with, perhaps more than other parties.
Yeah.
And a definition of a woman. For Keir Starmer, still an issue. What else are we talking about in these papers?
Let's talk about this front page of the Times. We've been discussing it all morning, actually, about the
Big
judges
story.
might lose this power to stop the planes taking off to deport people. What do you make of this, Ben?
So I remember covering this back in June when the first deportation flight was ready to go. It was on the tarmac at Boscombe Down in Wiltshire. And at the last minute, a judge from the European Court of Human Rights got out of bed, issued an injunction, the flight couldn't take off. Passengers were taken off and no flight has taken off since.
That's why they call it the pyjama injunction.
Pyjama injunction, yeah.
Judge who we've never had identified, by the way, but we don't even know what country that judge was from.
The rumour is it's Russia.
Oh, I couldn't make it up, could you?
I mean, that is the
that would be the ultimate.
Yeah.
I mean, the political element to this is that Rishi Sunak has opted not to have the fight with a group of backbenchers, the sort of hard right backbenchers, who were threatening to issue amendments to the bill, the illegal migration bill, which is back in the House next week. So instead, the Home Secretary, Chief Whip and the Prime Minister have come up with a sort of compromise option where they will say that the courts, that the government can ignore Rule 39, which is the diktat, basically, that's issued from the ECHR, which would stop flights taking off. The one problem with that is, of course, the government's been quite clear that it thinks it can do what it wants without pulling out of the ECHR. Well, whilst you're not pulling out of the ECHR, if you're going to ignore injunctions, and an injunction, it is sort of a judgment. It's not a long-term judgment, but it's a judgment made in a snap. If you're going to ignore that, well, that's a fine line then between just pulling out altogether, isn't it?
But we've ignored the European Court before, haven't we, Sam? I mean, for instance, we talked about this on the programme before, about, for instance, the European Court wanted to impose the right for every prison to have a vote. And it was blocked in the Commons by a massive vote, actually, and Parliament was sovereign, and the European Court backed away.
And actually, some Conservative MPs actually believe we can already do this. We don't need these amendments. We already have it in our power to do this. But what they do really, really want is the overseas outsourcing to happen, the processing overseas, so the Rwanda flights to happen, other deals to happen, because the lesson from Australia, where they obviously had a big problem for quite some time, is it's only by processing people in another country or, somewhere away from your borders that you solve this problem.
Because it becomes a deterrent.
Exactly.
Because they don't want to go to Rwanda, they want to go to Britain, the land of milk and honey. This will be popular, I would say, with the voters.
Absolutely. And I think as soon as the first flight takes off to Rwanda, should it ever happen, I think that will be an enormous feather in the Prime Minister's cap and make a big difference.
I must be hard right, Ben, because I completely agree with this, and you're referring to hard right and people. Well, I must be hard right. I've never thought of myself as hard right, but perhaps I am.
You have to think back to Tory party conference when the Home Secretary, Charlotte Braverman, said it was her dream to see a Telegraph front page with a flight taking off for Rwanda, and it was a bit cringe, her saying that.
I know what you mean, but it is a deterrent, I would argue, Rwanda.
We don't know, do we? Because it hasn't happened.
Yeah.
It's only if a flight does take off and then people stop coming over on boats that anyone can actually say with any credibility that it is a deterrent. We will only find out if and when a flight takes off.
They've got to try something, Ben, because what they're doing at the moment isn't working.
No, absolutely. We saw earlier this week they reached the threshold of 5,000 already for this year, and I think the predictions are something like 57,000.
And we're
in total to be able to be a record.
We've just come out of the winter.
Yeah,
and the weather's going to get better.
And exactly, as the weather improves, you will see more crossings take place. I mean, there's nothing really that the government can do. I mean, unless they want to start, seeding clouds or, the wave machine that Priti Patel was on about.
Oh, yes, that wave machine. That was very jolly. Very good.
Thanks for that, Ben and Sam. You'll be back a little bit later. Still to come, our coverage of the government seeking new powers to ignore human rights rulings. This is To The Point.
Hello again, I'm Aidan McGivern from the Met Office. A beautiful blue skies, sunny day for most of us today before it turns colder and more unsettled from tomorrow. A cool easterly breeze will bring some thicker cloud in from the east later on, but for the time being, high pressure to the north of the UK maintains plenty of fine weather. It's staying settled, it's staying dry for the vast majority, and barely a cloud in the sky in many spots. Blue skies for most, with that easterly breeze just bringing some additional cloud into East Anglia and the southeast by the afternoon. But elsewhere, just a few fair weather clouds in the sky, plenty of sunshine, and temperatures responding well in the west, 18, 19 Celsius. Northwest Scotland, perhaps up to 20 Celsius, but feeling cool once again on that North Sea coast, and especially as the cloud moves into East Anglia and the southeast by the end of the afternoon, with some showers arriving by the evening into London, the southeast, and then eventually southern parts of England. Elsewhere, we keep the clear skies, and for Scotland, Northern Ireland, Northern England, well, it's going to be a chilly night with temperatures dipping into the low single figures, and for parts of Scotland dipping below freezing, so a frost in places here. But the cloud and the breeze further south keeping things frost-free. However, we're going to see some wet weather moving in for Friday morning, moving across East Anglia and the southeast first thing, and then into parts of the Midlands, Wales and the southwest by lunchtime. That breaks up into showers, and for England and Wales, basically it's a cloudier day with the chance of some heavy showers around. Some brighter spells emerging through central parts, but it's going to be cooler, certainly with that cloud cover, 13 Celsius. But for Scotland and Northern Ireland, we keep the sunny skies. And here, again, mid to high teens possible towards the west, but still that cool easterly breeze for North Sea coast. Further spells of rain will affect eastern parts of England into Friday evening, and it's going to be a showery, fairly unsettled weekend with some heavy downpours and some longer spells of rain. It's also going to feel significantly cooler.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different. Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes & Co.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions are, those days are gone, I can tell you. She's only teasing. Go on. He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes & Co. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We've got a brand new lineup every Saturday night on GB News.
From 6 p.m, I'll give you my unique take on the world today.
Then at 7, it's me, Calvin Robinson, with my Common Sense Crusade.
New to GB News is the Saturday 5.
5 times the opinion.
Join us every Saturday from 8 p.m. as we debate the week's stories.
With us 4, plus a special guest.
And at 9, of course, it's Mark Dolan Tonight. Brand new Saturday nights on GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's 11 o'clock. Good morning. Welcome to The Point on GB News with Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner.
United in Manchester, fans of the both football clubs are laughing at the idea their team badges, they've got a boat on, we'll call it a ship, are linked to slavery.
Taking on the judges, the government seeks new powers to ignore human rights rulings over the Rwanda plan after pressure from their own MPs.
Long overdue. And is he going to go, or isn't he going to go? Talk that the report into alleged allegations of bullying against the Deputy Prime Minister Dominic Raab could drop on Rishi Sunak's desk in the next 40 minutes.
And coronation snob. Why has the late Queen's lady-in-waiting not been invited to King Charles' big day? We talk to a royal confidant. And we're going to have Sam and Ben back in the studio. There's some fantastic stories in the papers today that we haven't got to yet. Let us know your thoughts as well.
Yeah, the Hollywood star kissing his girlfriend, who looks much older than him. Quite a lot of controversy about that.
Yeah. Email us gbnews@gbnews.uk. But first of all, here's your morning's news with Rory Smith.
Thank you very much, Bev. The latest from the GB newsroom. Sir Jake Berry has branded Westminster's complaints system as outdated. The former Conservative chairman says it was wrong for the Deputy Prime Minister Dominic Raab to continue his job while under investigation for bullying allegations. Speaking to ITV, Sir Jake said the government needs to rethink how it deals with these sort of allegations, both against the ministers and members of Parliament. His comments come amid reports that senior Ministry of Justice officials could quit if Dominic Raab is cleared of the allegations. The Academy of Medical Royal Colleges has urged junior doctors and the government to find a solution to the deadlock over pay for the sake of patients and the wider NHS. Nearly 200,000 hospital appointments had to be rescheduled following the junior doctors' strike action last week. The Academy had helped to secure a deal between both sides following strike action back in 2016. The Association of School and College Leaders will hold a formal ballot for national strike action in England for the first time in its history. The ASCL says it is due to the ongoing school funding crisis, staff shortages and the breakdown of pay and conditions. The union has described the government's attempt to resolve the dispute last month as inadequate, with a pay offer rejected by 87% of its members. The organisation said the vote will be held in the summer term and any resulting strike action will be in the autumn. A suspected Russian spy ship has been spotted at key energy sites off the coast of Britain. It is claimed the vessel was looking around wind farms and other crucial infrastructures for possible vulnerabilities if conflict broke out between Russia and Western countries. A report says the ship sailed around the Baltic Sea and the North Sea for a month and is part of a fleet disguised as scientific research vessels. Experts say Ukraine is facing an unprecedented number of Russian cyber attacks. A report by the European Cyber Conflict Research Initiative says the cyber threats could create some concerning precedents. There are also concerns the UK and other allies could be targets. Security Minister Tom Tugendhat says the government will access the report and learn the lessons from it. Jens Stoltenberg has visited Ukraine for the first time since Russia's invasion. The NATO chief arrived in Kyiv to pay his respects to soldiers who died in the war and show his support as the country prepares for a counter-offensive. Stoltenberg has coordinated the support of 31 NATO members to aid in Ukraine's year-long war with Russia. At least 78 people have been killed and dozens injured following a stampede at a school in Yemen as hundreds gathered to receive aid. Cash donations were being handed out in the building in the final days of Ramadan. Eyewitnesses say people rushed to get the donations, leading people to fall on the school steps. Those responsible for organising the event have been detained. An investigation is underway. The first so-called cannabis card has launched in the UK. The Relief Medical Cannabis Card will be administered to qualifying medical cannabis patients. They can show law enforcement the ID if they're questioned for possession or consumption. It is after a study by the service found that just over half of the population is still unaware that medical cannabis is legal in the UK. A research group has found more than 1,300 homeless people died across the UK last year. The Museum of Homelessness said the figure was up by 85% since its work began 4 years ago. It says the government needs to address the immediate crisis and the lack of social housing that causes it. The Levelling Up department says its plans include a £186 million boost for services to help those affected by addictions and up to £53 million for suitable and stable accommodation. University students' complaints have hit a record high. An independent body set up to review student complaints received 2,850 complaints from students in England and Wales last year. Nearly 2 in 5 of the complaints were about academic appeals, including problems with marking and final degree results. The demand for electric cars has dropped by nearly 2/3 since the start of last year. New figures by Auto Trader show a 65% drop in inquiries for the vehicles last month compared with January last year. The company says it is due to the cost of living crisis, higher interest rates for borrowing and the rise in energy prices. A rare hybrid solar eclipse has appeared over the Australian town of Exmouth. The country is one of the few places in the world that experienced a cosmic event. The sky turned dark for about 60 seconds when the moon cast a 40-kilometre wide shadow over the area. Such event only occurs a few times per century. This is GB News. We'll bring you more as it happens. Now though, back to Andrew and Bev.
Well, it's a big political story because Rishi Sunak's listened to its Tory MPs, and apparently European judges will no longer, when they beef up the Stop the Boats legislation, be able to block deportation flights to Rwanda.
That's right. There was pressure, of course, on the Prime Minister from the right of the Conservative Party to take a more hardline stance on the European Court of Human Rights. Well, joining us now to discuss this is our political reporter, Olivia Utley. Good morning, Olivia. We've heard from a few naysayers this morning that say this has got no chance. We're just going to be back to square one again, costing the taxpayer money, are not making asylum seekers head over to Rwanda on the aeroplanes that we're paying for. What's the latest there from Westminster?
Yes, so there's been a number of rebel MPs from the right of the Conservative Party who, over the last few months, have been pushing pressure on Rishi Sunak and Suella Braverman to harden up the legislation that they've pushed on the table around stopping the boats. So essentially what they want is for judges, for the Home Secretary to be able to ignore judges if judges impose injunctions on deportations to Rwanda. They wanted a number of other measures to be included too, but last night they agreed to drop those measures in exchange for Rishi Sunak outlawing these pyjama injunctions, as they are called, last-minute injunctions which stop deportation flights going out at the last minute. That is a really big win for this group of Conservative rebels, because from what we can hear, it was actually quite a small group, only sort of 24 rebels, and the Chief Whip feels that Rishi Sunak didn't actually need to give in to them. But Rishi Sunak's calculation, presumably, is that the public will be on his side about this, will be on the rebels' side about this too. So giving in to them now makes quite a lot of sense. He can expect to face a big fight not only from Labour but also from the courts and from the House of Lords, and I think that's where it's going to get really, really interesting. Rishi Sunak has staked his reputation on stopping the boats, so if this legislation is held up in the House of Lords because it has been beefed up so much, I think we can expect to see quite a bit of a ding-dong between the two houses.
And he's spoiling for that fight, isn't he, Olivia? That's exactly the sort of political fight he wants with the Labour Party, who, say, are soft on illegal migration, and the unelected Lords stuffed full of lawyers and judges bleating about human rights.
Well, absolutely, and I think Suella Braverman behind the scenes has been not exactly giving the rebels a hard time. It sounds as though she's been allowing this rebellion to gather a bit of steam, and we know that she's already said that she wants to do something like this. We know that Suella Braverman, in fact, would like to leave the European Court of Human Rights, so she acknowledges that that isn't government policy. Meanwhile, quite interestingly, there's a group of moderates in the Tory party who are putting pressure on Rishi Sunak to amend the legislation so that genuine refugees are given more safe and legal routes to the UK. So these aren't economic migrants, these are genuine refugees who they feel don't actually have a safe way of getting to the UK, and they think that is contributing to the small boats problem. And it sounds as though Rishi Sunak might be about to give in to them as well. So he's facing these two battles on different sides of the party perhaps, but it could be that the public is with him on both sides.
If you could ask you just one other thing, there's a lot of speculation that the long-awaited report into allegations of bullying against Dominic Raab, the Justice Secretary, the Lord Chancellor, and his Deputy Prime Minister, is about to drop on the Prime Minister's desk in Number 10 within even perhaps the next 20 or 30 minutes. There's talk in The Guardian today that if Raab survives and he isn't sacked by the Prime Minister, a lot of senior civil servants will quit. What are you hearing about this report?
It does sound as though the report is going to come in imminently, and it sounds as though it might not be completely cut and dry, but what's quite interesting is that Dominic Raab's ministerial diary has been left completely blank, and it's thought that Rishi Sunak will make a decision within a few hours. A few days ago it was suggested that we wouldn't hear anything until next week, but now it's being said that Rishi Sunak will make a decision within a few hours on whether to sack the Justice Secretary and replace him. So I think things could be moving a little bit faster than we might have expected, and can't say for sure at all, don't want to speculate too much, but I would say it's not looking that good for Dominic Raab.
All right, that's Olivia.
Thanks, Olivia.
We don't even know how many civil servants have complained, but around more than 20, apparently. I've known Dominic Raab for over 20 years. He's tough, he's clever, he's forensic, and he expects a lot from his civil servants. A lot of whom are working from home, and apparently one of the things, he threw a tomato in a waste paper bin during a Zoom meeting. So it wasn't even like the tomato was going to splatter over a civil servant's pinstripe suit.
I mean, a lot of you are getting in touch and saying you don't want Dominic Raab to be sacked. You're frustrated in the workplace that you can't tell your colleagues or your juniors to do what's expected of them and buck up and do a full day's work. Like you say, a lot of these civil servants have been working from home, whinging. I mean...
Snowflakes.
So, I mean, it's a difficult one because the report is going to have to be absolutely conclusive in order for Sunak to kick him out.
It's being done by a KC, a King's Counsel, and he is done a narrative report. So he's not saying at the end of the report, Raab should be sacked. He's saying this is the allegation, this is what I found, and then the Prime Minister has to make the judgment. And, of course, when Priti Patel, when she was Home Secretary, was accused of bullying by the ministerial advisor on ethics, Boris Johnson completely ignored it and kept her in her job.
Yeah, can you imagine working with some of those civil servants, though?
Quite. I hope for one that Dominic Raab survives.
I don't know enough about it at the moment, but I think it will be quite harsh, probably, if he loses his job. How many years has he been working in politics?
Long time.
Yeah,
Must
be 10, 15 years.
And he's a clever guy, but anyway, we'll know, let's say, that report drops, I think, probably on the Prime Minister's desk in the next half an hour.
We're joined now by Senior Advisor at the Politics Change, Dr Rakib Ehsan. Good morning, Rakib. We wanted to talk to you this morning particularly about this signs of movement within the immigration situation. Will this amendment to the migration bill mean that we can see these planes take off? What's your opinion?
Well, my opinion is what we've heard recently is a step in the right direction. The illegal migration bill did need tightening up in particular areas. Namely, one of these proposed amendments would be that the Home Secretary would be able to ignore these Rule 39 orders from the European Court of Human Rights. I believe this was one of the orders that was used to ground the first attempted flight, deportation flight to Rwanda. And another proposed amendment is that the UK courts would only be able to step in and block removals if there was a serious and irreversible harm if that flight was to take place, meaning that breaching the Human Rights Act would be insufficient grounds to block the removal. So I think what we're seeing here is a hardening up of the illegal migration bill based on that pressure applied by these Tory rebels that Olivia was talking about earlier on.
Rakib, Amnesty, not surprisingly, have condemned this. They say it's barbaric and inhumane. And judges should be allowed to take part in the process. But my understanding is the first level of this, the British courts, cleared this flight to go to Rwanda, and it's now being looked at again by a higher court. So, in a sense, the judges will have an input into this. It's just be British judges, not European ones.
Oh, and I think that's a very important argument to make, that ultimately, if we're talking about judicial supremacy, that should very much reside with the UK courts. What people may be frustrated with is that you have a Strasbourg-based court ultimately undercutting the judicial decisions which are being made in the UK. And many people would see that as a state of affairs which they would not find to be acceptable, Andrew.
Do you believe, Rakib, that the Rwanda flights will act as a deterrent to people crossing the Channel to Britain because their applications will be processed in Rwanda? Rwanda is now talking about taking thousands, not just a few hundred.
If I'm being absolutely honest, I think that the only way that we could tell whether or not it is a deterrent is if the flights take place. And then as we see those flights taking place, we see a significant decrease in the number of small boats arrivals via the English Channel. I think that's the only way that we'll be able to tell whether or not it's a sound deterrence measure.
Yeah, and this is going to have a big battle in Parliament, of course, Rakib. Olivia Utley was making the point, the House of Lords won't like it. So it could mean this could take months and months. They may be publishing the legislation today, but it could be delayed for months.
No, I think that's a very real possibility, Andrew. And I do think that the government, it has ramped up the salience of this issue, the small boats issue. Stopping the boats is one of the 5 main pledges of the Prime Minister. So I think that the bill, in terms of its workability, that very much remains to be seen. Will it have an impact on the number of small boats arrivals leading up to the general election? If it doesn't, Andrew, there could be negative electoral consequences for the government.
Yeah, I would have thought so.
This suggestion, Rakib, you know this topic inside and out. Forgive me, guys, is it the Ascension Islands? There's one theory that I heard this week, you might know this, that immigrants should be taken to the Ascension Islands and processed there. What do you make of that suggestion?
Well, there have been a range of suggestions in terms of the sort of offshoring processes. I think that the government seems very fixed on making the UK-Rwanda migration partnership work. There's been talk about other Rwanda-style deals being struck. But I think the key here is that the government, there's a great deal of emphasis on the UK-Rwanda migration partnership being a deterrence measure. So I think the government really has to focus on ensuring that that migration partnership works in terms of shoring up our border security, in terms of the offshoring processing of those applications. And I think that is what the government really needs to focus on.
It'll be interesting if it happens because, you know, Rakib, of course, Denmark, which is a country that's proud of its social democracy, is also talking to Rwanda about an identical scheme.
No, absolutely, and I think that this is the key point that would be made by what I would consider to be old-fashioned leftists. That without a sort of restrictive immigration regime and sound border security, you can't really sustain an all-encompassing welfare state. And I think if that you have that unstable sort of membership of the nation state, and that you have this constant flux of what many people would consider to be illegal economic migration, then that poses a threat to the welfare state. And maybe if Labour makes that argument, they could see them a bit of a jump in the polls for themselves. But that I wouldn't hold my breath on that front.
OK, thank you. Dr Rakib Ahsan there with us. Still to come this morning, new NHS figures show that patients are waiting nearly 2 years for a cancer diagnosis. We'll find out why in just a moment.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage. Here on GB News, we will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better.
Crop failures, famine, war, suffering on a scale completely unimaginable.
We are putting the cart before the horse. As Charles I said at the scaffold, he was the true defender of liberty.
Yeah, I've completely derailed the conversation.
Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Very good morning. It's 11:23. You're with Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce on GB News. This is To The Point.
Now, some more depressing figures from the NHS revealed by the Labour Party under Freedom of Information show that 42% of patients are waiting 6 months, up to 6 months, to see a cancer doctor.
Yeah, it's awful. The figures also show that some patients are waiting up to 9 months for a simple test or a scan and up to 2 years for a diagnosis. So let's speak now to Professor Carol Sikora. Carol, great to see you this morning. This is devastating, isn't it, for everybody, whether you have cancer in your life at the moment or not?
It is. It's a very common disease. 1 in 2 of us are going to get it, Bev. And you shouldn't have to wait more than a month before you get diagnosed and start treatment. And, you know, even before COVID, we were falling way behind European norms. And now we're far, far behind. And I know this is politics. The Labour Party are using it against the Conservative Party, and that's the problem in this country. The health service is used as a political football ground instead of both parties sitting together and coming up with a strategy for the new NHS, for a new way of delivering healthcare. It just can't go on the way it's going.
I know that you, a bit like me during the pandemic, were deeply frustrated and tried where possible to speak out about the fact that the NHS has suddenly become a nothing but COVID service. We put everything on hold. Just reflect a little bit on your frustrations of that time and where we're at now.
I think during the time it was clear that no one knew how serious COVID was going to be and how quickly we were going to come out of it. But everybody else suffered. People with heart attacks didn't get admitted to hospital. People with cancer diagnosis. Chemotherapy was stopped in young women with breast cancer instantly with no explanation because of the problem. And I think it was an overreaction. We could have coped with COVID and still run the normal cancer services, normal heart services. And that just didn't happen. As we've come out of it, it's just not gone quickly enough. We've not there's been other problems, the industrial action by different professional groups in the health service, the very fact that the health service is so bureaucratic and so behind in being a consumer organization. I mean, there's no other consumer organization I know that you'd have to phone up, wait on the phone for an hour and be told you can't have an appointment to see someone. And this is just unbelievable. Or to wait 12 hours in an emergency room to get stitched. I mean, there's no other organization that I know of would make you wait. Not even a budget airline would treat you that badly. So I think the importance is getting it much more consumer focused and getting things moving again.
Carol, if the Labour Party were here, they would say this is all about money. The mean-spirited Tory government's not spending enough money. If the Tory Party would say, they'll say we're spending record amount of money. You said even before COVID we were slipping back with cancer. Why is it such a problem? Is it money or is it something else?
It's the organisation of diagnostic services. So if you have cancer, there's no point phoning 111, NHS 111, the online service. You have to see your GP, who has to make a referral. Now, in the year 2000, that's 23 years ago, we came up with a 2-week wait. And the plan was that if your GP thought you had cancer, you had to be seen within 2 weeks. And it sort of worked, but it was only meant to be short term till we could build the diagnostic capacity. And that just hasn't happened. So although the 2-week wait's still there, the targets are being breached all the time. The other target, 2 months to start treatment from diagnosis, that's being breached in many trusts around the country. And it's as though we've become a third world service. If you go to France, you go to Germany, it's totally different. Everybody with symptoms that could be cancer gets sorted out within 2 weeks. Your scans, your biopsies and so on. It just doesn't happen here. It's too slow.
You know what the problem is. You'll have talked to people in the health service about it. Ministers must know what the problem is. Why doesn't it get fixed, Carol?
I think the problem is when you go to NHS England, which is like the control room of the NHS in Elephant and Castle in South London, and it's like a signal box where they've got lots of signals, lots of levers, but they're not connected anywhere. So the hospitals, the trusts around the country have their own management structure and nothing seems to get through. So all you get from the centre are platitudes. We're spending another £1 billion on diagnostic equipment and so on. But actually, the levers are being pulled, but the cables have gone missing. and someone's eaten the cables, and that's the problem.
We had a cancer survivor on earlier that we spoke to about her successful journey, actually, of getting over cancer. And I said to her, now with these wait times, don't we have a two-tier system whereby if you have a family member who has cancer, you will sell anything to get the treatment. You're not going to sit there and wait for 6 to 12 months for treatment or diagnosis, which means inevitably we have a two-tier system. If you do have what you think is cancer or is confirmed to be cancer right now, do you get better care privately, or is the NHS still your best option?
You know, the thing to do is to use private care where you can unblock a delay. And the biggest delay is not in treatment, it's actually in the diagnosis. So a delay in getting a scan. If you're told, come back in 6 months for a scan, that's not good enough. You can get one. There are sites which, like, you compare pricing, go compare type sites for scans. You can book one for 300 quid. Now, I'm not recommending that, but there's no doubt, identify where the block is, what's holding things up, and try and unblock it. Be persuasive. Don't get aggressive. Don't shout at anybody, but just be persuasive. And I think that will unblock pathways and get you through.
Brilliant.
OK, thank you, Carol. Professor Carol Sikora there, of course. So full of common sense.
Yes, why can't they make him Secretary of State for Health? Have an expert.
We have people on this show every day where I think, why can't that person have a position of responsibility and to help make these decisions?
And of course, he is curing people of cancer all the time.
Well, that's quite important.
It certainly is. Lots of GB views coming in, talking about Rwanda. Daniel says it's obvious this news is more just kicking the can down the road. Just watch, nothing will happen. Joe says, quite the opposite, I'm sick of these Liberal groups telling me what I should think or that I'm in some way bad for wanting our laws to be respected. Yeah. And Richard said, I voted Conservative because they were going to take back control of our borders. Stop the boats. We were told. And Amy in Fife says, MPs should have to commit to a day release where they deal with asylum claims, and that will get them busy sorting all of this border control problem out. And Bev says, not me, all need deporting before we have too many to remove. Oh, we've already got too many to remove. We've got tens of thousands of them. Do you know, in hotels all around the country. Well, the thing is, we know we've got a cost of living crisis here. We're all feeling it, etc. But when I was in Morocco last week, you realise that is globally, there are people struggling, OK? The poverty that I witnessed driving through Morocco with people living in basically just sort of shanty towns in the middle of the desert. And my partner and I looked, we just went, it is no wonder people want to come here. We are such an attractive proposition, so we need a good solution. And climate change is going to make even more people migrate. Anyway, more on that now. Just Stop Oil protesters, you know them? Apparently they're refusing to rule out sabotaging the coronation next month. Well, that would be a supreme self-inflicted own goal. We're going to debate whether or not the police should be given more powers to curb public disturbances like that. That's after your headlines now with Rory Smith.
Thank you, Andrew. The latest from the GB newsroom. Sir Jake Berry has branded Westminster's complaints system as outdated. The former Conservative chairman says it was wrong for the Deputy Prime Minister, Dominic Raab, to continue in his job while under investigation for bullying allegations. Speaking to ITV, Sir Jake said the government needs to rethink how it deals with these sort of allegations, both against the ministers and members of Parliament. It comes amid reports that senior Ministry of Justice officials could quit if Dominic Raab is cleared of the allegations. The Academy of Medical Royal Colleges has urged junior doctors and the government to find a solution to the deadlock over pay for the sake of patients and the wider NHS. Nearly 200,000 hospital appointments had to be rescheduled following the junior doctors' strike action last week. The Academy previously helped to secure a deal between both sides following strike action back in 2016. The Association of School and College Leaders will hold a national strike ballot for the very first time. The union says a lack of funding, pay and conditions and staff shortages led to the decision. It has described the government's attempts to resolve the dispute last month as completely inadequate. A vote will be held in the summer with strike action due in the autumn. A suspected Russian spy ship has been spotted at key energy sites off the coast of Britain. It is claimed the vessel was looking around wind farms and other crucial infrastructures for possible vulnerabilities if conflict broke out between Russia and Western countries. A report says the ship sailed around the Baltic Sea and the North Sea for a month and is part of a fleet disguised as scientific research vessels. A rare hybrid solar eclipse has appeared over the Australian town of Exmouth, one of the few places in the world that experienced a cosmic event. The sky turned dark for around 60 seconds when the moon cast a 40-kilometre wide shadow over the area. Events like this one only occur a few times per century. TV, online, DAB, digital and tune-in radio. This is GB News.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for gold and silver investment.
All right, let's have a quick look at today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.2432 and €1.1336. The price of gold is £1,609.92 per ounce. And the FTSE 100, that's currently at 7,883 points.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for physical investment.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Deebs & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m, and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Hello, I'm Calvin Robinson. Do not miss my Common Sense Crusade Saturdays at 7 p.m. Join me for some in-depth discussions on faith.
Is that not the start of the slippery slope?
It's very much so. And the big moral questions of the day.
I'm baffled.
You've got some nerve.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good morning, it's 11:37. You're with To The Point on GB News. So we're just getting live pictures from France where protesters are having a day of expression of railway anger, is how it's described, following months of strike action and a failed opposition to pension reforms.
This is the French people are protesting because Macron, the president, wants to raise the pension age from 62 to 64. Is this going to happen here at some point? Because ours 67, it's going to be 68 soon. And then what if we want to raise it to 70?
We don't have quite
we don't go on the streets like that, do we?
Do we?
I mean, and Macron's popularity is at an all-time low. Good, can't bear him. This is really... The whole country is up in arms.
Isn't it extraordinary? Sam Lister's with us from the Daily Express. We've also got Ben Glaze, deputy editor of the Mirror, political editor of the Mirror. What do you make of that, guys? Normally they wait till night time to have a big strike, riot, don't they?
Any excuse in France, isn't
it?
Yeah, first setting fires in the middle of the streets. But I think, you know, the fact that it is over going to 64, I mean, we would be weeping with joy for 64, wouldn't we? And
beaches aren't quite as nice as... yeah, but maybe. What do you make of it, Ben?
Yeah, I was actually in Paris a few weeks ago to come watch the Wales-France game in the Six Nations, and the night before the game, we were walking along the banks of the Seine on the way back from the Eiffel Tower, having seen the sights, and then there's suddenly this police van's on fire, a petrol tank exposed, like, welcome to France, guys, you know, it's just proper...
It's really not a good look, but he's sticking to his guns, Macron.
Well, I mean, he's not up for re-election, is he?
Quite.
So he can basically push this through.
Two-term president, yeah.
Yeah, no consequence.
And, of course, the... Marine Le Pen on the right, she's really tapping into all of this, trying to exploit it. But, anyway, extraordinary. Who'd go to Paris at the moment? Not me, thanks very much.
Right, shall we move on a little closer to home with some of our stories here today? In fact, this isn't quite... Oh, Dominic Raab, let's talk about that one, shall we? This report is going to be dropped any minute now, apparently. What do you think is going to happen?
It could even be on the Prime Minister's desk right now, actually.
Exactly. Well, his fate could be decided today. So we understand that Number 10 is going to receive the report either this morning or tomorrow morning. We don't know for sure which yet. But once he's got it, Rishi Sunak's going to take a couple of hours to read it, and he will decide whether or not Dominic Raab should be sacked as Deputy Prime Minister and Justice Secretary. Well, whilst that's going on, of course, we've got still reports coming out of the sort of behaviour that Dominic Raab is supposed to have indulged in. And then there's a report this morning that if he is spared, Ministry of Justice officials will walk anyway because they don't want him back as their boss.
And the report's been done, Sam, by Adam Tolley, who's a KC. It's an independent report. And actually, as I recall, in November, when the first bullying allegations came to light, Raab actually said to the Prime Minister, set up an independent inquiry, and he's actually paid his own legal fees, I gather.
Yeah, but I think the problem with this report is, for the Prime Minister, it's going to be very factual.
Yes.
And it's not going to give a kind of big...
get rid of him or keep him.
So it does then land back on the Prime Minister's shoulders. He will have to make that decision. And obviously, Raab is one of his close allies.
Yeah.
He really went out to bat for him last summer during the leadership contest. He remained loyal throughout that whole time when obviously Liz Truss won. And so the Prime Minister, I know, wants to repay that loyalty, but obviously there is a clamour among civil servants and the left-wing press for Dominic Raab's scalp. So it'll be difficult for him.
The Guardian have been making a lot of the headway on this, Ben, haven't they? And I've talked to some Tories in the last week and say, we can't let him go. We can't let him go because who will the civil servants go for? Which will be the next minister they'll go for?
Well, Rishi Sunak is going to be quite keen to keep him because, as Sam said, the loyalty that Raab showed throughout that summer leadership campaign, even when it was blatantly obvious that Rishi Sunak was going to lose to Liz Truss, you know, Raab was still there introducing him at the various hustings, even though the ship had sailed, really.
It had.
And Rishi does want to repay that loyalty. But when he's presented with this report from Tolley, it's going to set out a he said, she said, if you like, of the allegations, and it's going to be up to the Prime Minister to decide whether or not what is alleged to have taken place constituted bullying. And if he keeps him, well, we saw what happened with Boris Johnson when he decided to keep Priti Patel. You know, that was another nail in the coffin of Boris Johnson's premiership. I think if Rishi Sunak decides it is bullying, I think he will get rid of him.
Yes, he will.
And, of course, Raab himself has said if he is found to have committed bullying, that he'll go anyway,
Yeah, it's really fascinating.
It's that fine line, isn't it, between what is just robust feedback to a colleague or a junior in the workplace and what is bullying. What's the best outcome for Rishi Sunak?
Well, he wants to keep him because he doesn't want to do a reshuffle.
So the conclusion being that the report concludes...
It wasn't, in my view... He's not going to say in my view, but you can read into it that actually this was just a very robust
He was
minister.
a difficult boss.
A difficult boss, and we've all...
Very demanding,
bosses.
yeah.
Quite a few difficult bosses in newspapers, I might actually say, which is what all of us know about.
That's part of it, isn't it? Actually, we've all been brutalised by the newspaper industry. And so actually, probably a lot of these things that would just be watered off the duck's back.
But you've got to remember, when Gavin Williamson was given the push last year as Cabinet Office Minister, the report into bullying him, he'd actually said to a civil servant something like, why don't you jump off the roof or jump out the window? No, I didn't think that was the end of the world, really, but
I think it was when it said, why don't you
serious bullying.
I think he also said, why don't you slit your throat or
He did say that, actually, which was pretty...
That probably crossed the line.
Yeah. But I can't, knowing Dominic Raab as well as I don't know that well, but I just can't imagine he would have used that sort of language.
No.
He's a clever lawyer.
Yeah, he's just got very high standards. And there is, I think, younger staff, if I dare say, actually have very...
Snowflakes? Are we allowed to use that word? I'll use it.
Do we know anything about who has made... Do we know any names or identities of the specific complainant?
There are some senior civil servants, so it isn't actually all junior members of staff. And so I think that actually goes against Dominic Raab, that's his senior ones. But then, you know, actually, Conservative MPs are furious about this. They feel like it is a civil service vendetta, and they really don't want to leave.
And some senior civil servants, I think, have told Tolly, actually, Raab is just a tough operator. He's not a bully.
Some have, but others also had to warn Raab in the various departments about his treatment of staff.
Yeah, and this goes back some years, doesn't it?
It does, yeah. And I think because he's served in various different Whitehall ministries over the past 10 years or so. One of the things I think that's going to go against Raab is the critical mass. Because if it was just one or two, then you could be like, he didn't get on particularly well with those employees. It's not one or two, it's lots.
But that's the trouble in these sorts of accusations in the workplace, isn't it? A rolling stone gathers moss, and it only takes one chat over the water cooler for somebody to say, oh, he did that to me as well, and then you're never going to guess what, this happened, this happened, this happened.
You're a brave man if you take him on, of course, because he's unusual in the cabinet. He's got a black belt in karate. and
that throbbing vein in his head.
And that throbbing vein in his head, and he's very fit, and his diary always got built into his diary his time in the gym. I mean, he is super fit. And super strong. I wouldn't argue with him. I wouldn't argue with him.
I'm not sure that's... Will we get to see the report?
Yeah, it's going to be published.
Oh, it will be published.
Yeah.
We will all get to see it and decide...
I think we see the summary, don't we?
Yes.
Rather than the whole report.
Yeah, and then people will also be able to draw their own conclusions, because, of course, Labour will say, and the opposition MP, we've got to see it. He's a cabinet minister.
Well, that will be interesting. No doubt there'll be presenters on GB News throughout the remainder of today, picking that apart. My money's on Dan Wotton at 9 o'clock tonight. I don't know about you. Right, can we move on to another quick story? This is an interesting one. Keanu Reeves, right?
Yeah.
Famous actor, marvellous, handsome man. Still got all his long, dark locks. We're going to show you a photo in just a moment. Well, he was seen on the red carpet with his girlfriend. She's an artist. She's called Alexandra Grant, and they were kissing each other. There they are. Now, what's odd about this photo, you ask? Well, Kate Spicer's done a comment piece in the the Daily Mail today. Our sexist reaction to it. Ben, when you see that picture, what strikes you as a little odd?
Well, first of all, I think Keanu Reeves looks a steak, and if I had his money, I'd have a haircut and have a shave.
Quite right.
But yes, the grey hair of Alexandra Grant, his girlfriend, who's 50 years old, so there's an 8-year age gap between them. But he's not with a nubile 25-year-old, as we might expect Leonardo DiCaprio to be.
He's 58, she's 50. Can we see the photo again, please? He's 58, she's 50. But, Sam, we're so used to seeing a 58-year-old man with a 28-year-old woman that this is sort of jarring.
Yeah, and, most Hollywood heartthrobs go for a fashion accessory, really, don't they? But he's obviously gone for a soulmate, and that's a much more powerful thing.
And she's got grey hair, and she hasn't succumbed to the pressure to colour her hair.
But I have to say, I know it's a great thing, and like the feminist in me wants to embrace the grey, but it's never going to happen. So
no, never. But the thing is, that's what a 50-year-old woman does look like. Yeah. That's what's so shocking about this. Really, it shouldn't be shocking, but it is.
But of course, Beth Turner's a bit of an expert on toy boys.
Well,
if I may suggest,
you can talk.
The floor is yours.
You can talk. But as somebody who is in an age gap relationship, I've got my other half is 40. 13 years my junior. So I also sometimes get accused of being unusual, which I am, but more and more common every day, let me tell you, Sam. Can't recommend it highly enough. So I am unusual, my boyfriend being younger than me, but this, Ben, raises all sorts of issues, doesn't it, about existing residual sort of sexism expectations of what women should look like.
And the interesting piece here by Kate Spicer, she acknowledges she is being sexist, that she is judging this fellow woman. And, you know, Kate Spicer's byline pic, she's got grey hairs, to be fair to her, and she basically writes about how my nice brown hair was red when I spotted the first grey hair, then a lush brown, then blonde, endless shades of blonde, and she basically says she gave up because she couldn't fight the ageing process any longer. But, yeah, it is unusual to see Hollywood A-lister on a red carpet with someone of more or less his own age, and certainly someone who's not that glammed up and certainly hasn't dyed her hair.
No, but I agree with you, Ben. He looks a complete state. He looks like a tramp.
He looks like one of these civil servants who's complaining about Dominic Raab, I think,
exactly.
Sam. I think, though, do you wonder if we're going to have a bit of a backlash against all of the procedures, the cosmetic surgery, the dyeing of the hair that we've seen in women so long? There is a slight movement, isn't there, towards it?
Yeah, I think there's a certain identikit look, isn't there, for the younger generation, where you've got these big lips and the kind of frozen face and the same colour hair, and it's all big.
I'm glad you mentioned the big lips. It's like an epidemic in this country, isn't it? Really young girls in their early 20s, and they've got trout lips, and it looks so unattractive.
My daughter, when she was 10, came to me and said, "Mummy, when do my lips grow?"
Oh, wow.
And she has the most beautiful full lips. And she said, "When do my lips grow?" And I had to work out, she said, "When am I going to look like the ladies on the telly?" And I had to explain. And that's how normalised it's become.
Yeah.
I'm not a fan.
But really young.
Yeah. And that's
very,
a
very
worrying
young
thing, because women should be taught that, actually, you know, this is not a normal state of affairs to pump your lips.
It must be so painful.
We'd come so far, though, hadn't we, in terms of saying it doesn't matter what women look like, just be, you know, you shouldn't be judged on your looks alone. And it feels now like the younger generation particularly, are going kind of backwards in that. So,
I don't want rubber lips.
Who looks 50.
Well,
I do not want rubber lips.
I'm with you there, Andrew.
Rubber lips, Ben?
Not for me.
I can't tell how old anyone is anymore. Sometimes 27-year-olds look 47 and then 47-year-olds look 30. I'm totally lost. Right, let's move on now to inflation, Ben. This is in your newspaper. The cost of living crisis is getting worse. Inflation gone up.
So the inflation figures, everyone predicted yesterday they'd fall into single digits, about 9.9%. They didn't. It went down to 10.1%, so still double-digit inflation. That's a big problem for the Prime Minister, who's promised to halve it by the end of the year. But when you dig down into the figures, the cost of food has gone up 19%. You look at some of the examples here. Cheddar cheese, it's gone up £3.6, 49% in a year. And the scale of the price rises is the worst for 45 years. So, and the other thing is, like, you don't buy a new telly every day, do you, right? You do buy food every day. And it affects, because the nature of it, it's affecting the poorest in society.
Yeah.
You know, they're harder hit by all this. And the worst thing is, as well, these inflation figures, when the Bank of England's Monetary Policy Committee meets on May the 11th, they'll look at these and they could put up interest rates again. They will put them up, probably,
Food inflation is potentially deadly for the Conservative government, in my view. And we know Ukraine has been a big factor because it's a huge exporter of grain and the Russian blockade. But why are things like cheese and milk and bread soaring in price?
It's crazy, isn't it? But I think, actually, the retailers, they say there's a 9-month lag in wholesale prices dropping, and then consumers noticing that at the supermarket. So they're suggesting, actually, in a few months' time, we will start to see prices come down again. But, you know,
do you believe
prices go up, they never go down.
Do you believe them?
I mean, I don't know. It's hard to say, isn't it? And actually, so, you know, some people in the Mirror piece do say, actually, this is... this is people making theory now.
I mean, I said to him yesterday, supermarkets seem to me to be operating like a cartel. They're a closed group, and they're all charging around the same prices, and everything goes up about the same amount.
But the other problem is, once inflation falls, remember, that's not prices falling.
No,
they're just rising less fast, just rising a bit more slowly. So the price rises that we've got now, they're embedded. Unless we have deflation in certain areas of the economy and things like food, then those prices, that's what we're going to be paying, and more.
Tell you what, Ben, can you get your newspaper to get all the supermarket bosses to answer the question as to why they're not passing this on, and really push them on Sam's 9-month, because I just don't buy it at all.
I mean, we've had Prime Ministers demand summits before of energy chiefs and the like, and the banking chiefs. Get those supermarket chiefs, make them do the walk of shame up Downing Street and say, explain it.
The Liberal Democrats have actually this morning issued a press release demanding an emergency food summit at Downing Street.
Right.
So, you know, they're often keen to jump on the bandwagon, but I think this is a good point.
Somehow.
Well, no, but
it wouldn't have been a bad idea for the Tories to have got there first.
Get in first, yeah, exactly.
I imagine all of these brands probably advertising your newspaper, so you're not going to hold them to account, are you?
Oh, I think we always hold people to account, yeah.
That goes for you as well, Sam.
Always.
And you as well, Adele.
Course,
You're all
yeah,
at
yeah.
it. You're all collaborating with
We've
the
got to talk
supermarkets.
woke Manchester Football Club. Are you a football fan, Ben? Are you a football fan,
I'm
Sam?
more of a rugby man, but I am a football fan. My team won 3-1 last night, Cardiff City.
Oh, well done.
Yeah,
Well done. What
might just
division are they
avoid
in?
relegation. About to get relegated from the Championship, probably.
Oh, well,
Oh,
congratulations.
right, OK. But this is a great story on the front of the Sun, isn't it?
Yeah.
The Guardian are campaigning, like an idiot paper, against the two ships on the Manchester City badge and the Manchester United badge because they think it's to do with the slave trade. Actually, we think it's to do with the fact they have a very famous Manchester ship canal.
Yeah, it just didn't occur to me it would be anything to do with slavery. And I don't think many people would have thought that, apart from...
These football clubs weren't around when there was a slave trade either.
And they have a very famous Manchester ship canal. You know, I've walked part of that canal along
Yes,
the banks.
so have I.
It's huge. It's big. It's what Manchester's famous
Yeah.
for, you know.
I've never seen a ship on it like that. I mean, it doesn't look like a big sort of tall ship, pirate ship.
But somebody
But it would have been back in the
earlier
day.
said it looks more like the Blue Peter badge.
Yes, yeah.
What do you make of it, Sam? Is
Well,
the
just-
Guardian gone a bit woke mad?
I mean, they're kind of self-flagellation, isn't it, with The Guardian
Yeah.
always? And they're now kind of apologising for their own links to the slave trade. And, you know, where does this get us to? You know, in what way do football clubs in Manchester have anything to do with the slave trade that was abolished before they even existed? I mean, it's just a ridiculous
And Beverley's
approach.
pointed out earlier, if you look at most football clubs, how many highly paid black staff do they have on the books? Enormous.
It's probably the biggest employer of black men on 6-figure, 7-figure, 8-figure salaries.
Yeah, and very
You know,
visible.
It's a really tenuous link to try to link football to slavery. It's
Yeah.
extraordinary.
The Sun put it nicely. Woke lunatics can keep their hands off our badges. Never too understated.
Right, Tom Harwood is going to tell us what he's got coming up this afternoon. Hello, Tom.
Hello, yes, it is a very big show today. We've got some live events that we were expecting. Could today be the day? Could the next few hours be the moment that Dominic Raab may be forced to resign as the Deputy Prime Minister? We're expecting the report into alleged bullying from him perhaps in the next few hours. We're also on Nicola Sturgeon watch. 2 people of the SNP have already been arrested. Could the former First Minister be the third? We'll be live from Glasgow. And of course, spy ships, Russian spy ships stalking the coast of the United Kingdom. Is our energy infrastructure safe? Big questions today, all coming up from midday.
Hello again, I'm Aidan McGiven from the Met Office. A beautiful blue skies, sunny day for most of us today before it turns colder and more unsettled from tomorrow. A cool easterly breeze will bring some thicker cloud in from the east later on, but for the time being, high pressure to the north of the UK maintains plenty of fine weather. It's staying settled, it's staying dry for the vast majority, and barely a cloud in the sky in many spots. Blue skies for most, with that easterly breeze just bringing some additional cloud into East Anglia and the southeast by the afternoon. But elsewhere, just a few fair weather clouds in the sky, plenty of sunshine, and temperatures responding well in the west. 18, 19 Celsius. Northwest Scotland, perhaps up to 20 Celsius, but feeling cool once again on that North Sea coast, and especially as the cloud moves into East Anglia and the southeast by the end of the afternoon, with some showers arriving by the evening into London, the southeast, and then eventually southern parts of England. Elsewhere, we keep the clear skies, and for Scotland, Northern Ireland, Northern England, well, it's going to be a chilly night with temperatures dipping into the low single figures, and for parts of Scotland dipping below freezing, so a frost in places here. But the cloud and the breeze further south keeping things frost-free. However, we're going to see some wet weather moving in for Friday morning, moving across East Anglia and the southeast first thing, and then into parts of the Midlands, Wales and the southwest by lunchtime. That breaks up into showers, and for England and Wales, basically it's a cloudier day with the chance of some heavy showers around. Some brighter spells emerging through central parts, but it's going to be cooler, certainly with that cloud cover, 13 Celsius. But for Scotland and Northern Ireland, we keep the sunny skies, and here again, mid to high teens possible towards the west, but still that cool easterly breeze for North Sea coast. Further spells of rain will affect eastern parts of England into Friday evening. And it's going to be a showery, fairly unsettled weekend with some heavy downpours and some longer spells of rain. It's also going to feel significantly